Hard work can take you to different places, like a world of glamorous parties and social circles, or a world full of pretty dresses and strawberry desserts. For someone who ended up living a life she never imagined, a world with a lot of handsome men might just be her destiny. It's been 2 weeks, but it feels like a lifetime, almost unreal. Chasing wealth and a high-flying career can land you in a completely different reality. So much time has passed, but the girl who seemed destined for a cruel fate still hasn't woken up to reality. Right now, she just wants to believe that none of this is real, that it's all just her illusion. This has to be a dream, because this can't possibly be real. She can't actually be inside a novel, and as a villainess no less. Eager to figure out what was happening, she accidentally stubbed her little toe on a table leg, and it felt like an electric shock. Okay then. It was clear now, this was definitely not her imagination, because that pain was very real. The young lady simply couldn't comprehend how any of this had happened. Everything here looked so peaceful, and she had ended up in an incredibly beautiful place, a luxurious mansion. But the girl couldn't even enjoy the beauty, because this was the very place where she was fated to die. In this world, she was Lucia Aurelius, the tyrannical villainess who loses everything. In this story, she would bid farewell to her fiancé, lose her reputation, and ultimately her life. But this was just absurd because that wasn't her at all. She was just an ordinary girl from the 21st century who had fought her own battles her whole life. Of all the characters, fate had to choose her to be the bad guy, as if she deserved it for something she'd done. For whatever reason, she didn't belong here. This wasn't her life. In her old life, everything was different. She had her best friend and dreams she was fighting for. She had worked so hard, pouring her heart and soul into achieving her goals. In the end, it was all for nothing, just to die in some damn novel. No way, absolutely not. This girl was not going to sit back and wait for death. But first, she needed to figure out exactly how much she knew about this story. In the original novel, the story began with the prince's engagement ceremony, which was where the female lead first appeared. That was still a whole month away. She figured she just had to avoid all the main characters, stay away from the plot, and trust that this novel world wouldn't force her to follow the script. Lucia's behavior for the past 2 weeks had been a bit frantic, and she was pretty sure the villainess in the story didn't have this much on her mind. Among the characters she remembered, there was a knight who was supposed to kill Lucia, her annoying stepbrothers, and the crown prince fiancé, making a total of 4 people. Avoiding so many characters shouldn't be hard, but Lucia didn't live with her brothers, and the crown prince was her fiancé, so she couldn't just disappear. The thought of it made her dizzy, and she had no idea how to avoid them. Realizing her previous plan wouldn't work, she decided to find another way, and that's when the crown prince caught her attention. Now trapped as the villainess, Lucia had to transform from a modern workaholic into a social strategist. Last week, Lucia couldn't even get out of bed, but now she seemed ready for a walk to the imperial palace. Linda didn't hide her concern, worried that the young lady would fall ill again. But Miss Aurelius assured her that she was perfectly fine, hoping her tone sounded elegant enough for this era. The girl couldn't get used to this strange culture overnight, and having someone else dress her was just too embarrassing. Linda was sure her young lady must have been missing the prince terribly these days, and that they must have a lot to talk about regarding the engagement. She wasn't wrong, and today Lucia was going to take the first step, breaking off her engagement with the crown prince. After a while, the royal carriage set off, but the wheels hit some stones on the road. The carriage started to shake, and since it was Lucia's first time in a carriage, she found it super uncomfortable. And so, they drove into this wonderfully scenic old town. The girl saw the charming little place and immediately fell in love with it. It was like something out of a fairy tale. There were a lot of people, and everything felt so warm and welcoming. This wonderful place captivated Lucia, so she decided she had to come back again. Before the official meeting, this was the perfect place for a walk and see everything up close. The girl decided to go over her plan one more time. First, she arrives at the castle. She proposes to break the engagement. The prince agrees, and she's in the clear, or he refuses, and things get very tricky. Lucia hadn't considered that possibility at all, but it was too late to panic now, because the imperial palace was right in front of her. The imperial palace was a blend of history and luxury, with breathtakingly gorgeous interiors and gardens. It combined various styles, showcasing family values in a unique fusion of architecture and tradition. Miss Lucy was received with great hospitality, and a servant brought hot tea and freshly baked strawberry waffles. She also mentioned that the crown prince would be over shortly. Now that the girl was here, this was really happening. She was even more scared now than she was a moment ago. She was sure he would agree to break off the engagement. The prince didn't want this marriage any more than she did, so there was no reason for him to refuse. The hall doors burst open, and he finally appeared, a tall, imposing, and stunningly handsome man. This had to be the male lead. Just looking at him, Lucy held her breath. Being this close to the prince felt overwhelming. He had heard she was unwell, so the first thing he did was ask if she was feeling better. He apologized for not being able to visit, but Lucy understood that he'd been busy. The prince was polite, even if he wasn't thrilled to see her. For the girl, this was definitely a good sign. After gathering her thoughts, she said she wanted to talk about their engagement. Hearing this, the prince's expression changed. He sighed heavily and reminded her that they couldn't move the wedding date up any further. But when the young lady announced that she wanted to break off the engagement, His Highness the Crown Prince stopped breathing for a moment. It was unbelievable, but Lucia Aurelius really wanted to call off the wedding. His Highness hadn't expected to hear something like this, so he decided to find out why she suddenly wanted to cancel. The thing is, the prince definitely didn't love her, and Lucy wasn't sure if she would ever love him. Besides, he didn't want to marry her. She wouldn't be happy if he married her against his will. And besides, she was sure the crown prince would have no problem finding a new bride. Lucy was sure he and the female lead would meet sooner or later, because it was their story, after all. She didn't want to interfere, and not every story needs a villain. And Lucia was that villain. The prince was taking a really long time to think. He must be shocked, but isn't this what he wanted? Miss Aurelius couldn't wait to be dumped, because he was going to do it sooner or later anyway. She just wanted to speed up the breakup, because she was sure he wouldn't change his mind. As we expected, His Highness was as happy as a kid on Christmas and agreed to break off the engagement. He really didn't want to marry this girl. Lucy was glad His Highness was on the same page. If this was what she wanted, then the crown prince would prepare all the documents. They could announce it at the royal banquet. She just had to be there, and that was it. But she had no memory of any royal banquet. Whatever, it didn't matter now. The most important thing was that the engagement was off, and Lucy would be there for that. Lucia did it. She had just called off her own wedding. That was too easy. The prince was more than happy to get rid of the bride he didn't want. This was exactly what she wanted. It was finally over. Thinking about it, Lucy would probably never come back here again. It's not every day you get to see the imperial palace. After all, she decided to take this opportunity to look around. It should be fine if she went back just a little bit later. Meanwhile, on the knight's training grounds, 2 knights were dueling. It might have seemed too fast for some, but for the master swordsman, it was too slow. His mastery of striking techniques and stunning moves was perfect, and he easily defeated his opponent. He praised the boy for being strong, but told him to work on his body positioning. Even though they were using wooden swords, they were still heavy, so you need to move faster on the battlefield. The knight wanted to show him how to handle that problem, but hearing a woman's voice, he knew it wasn't going to happen today. The royal lady-in-waiting, Lady Maria, rushed over to take him away immediately. It seemed the master had been caught again. This was the 3rd time this week. It was incredible that someone like him was so bad at sneaking around. Lady Maria understood that His Highness liked to be outside the palace, but he couldn't keep skipping his lessons. Just then, he asked if he had mentioned how charming Maria looked today. But his flattery didn't work, and there was no escaping his lessons this time. Since the weather was nice, the lady-in-waiting allowed His Highness to study outdoors and told him to follow her. Besides, his brother's coronation was coming up, which meant the master would be taking on a lot of new responsibilities. He needed to take it seriously, because if anything happened to the king, he was next in line for the throne. Also, Maria didn't like the knights he was hanging out with. She had overheard him calling a council member a scoundrel. Seeing that venomous woman in the royal gardens again, the lady-in-waiting was very annoyed and wondered what she was doing there. It's crazy. She wasn't even queen yet, and Maria was already getting a headache because of her. This was great. Things with the prince went very smoothly, and he even said he would handle the paperwork himself. Suddenly, the girl heard a cat meowing and saw a small kitten stuck in a tree. Her inner cat lady was instantly activated, and she had to help the poor little thing. Considering her priorities, she felt that climbing a tree in a dress was perfectly feasible. Lucia nimbly climbed the tree in her long dress and was just about to reach it. Then the branch broke and she fell. It was definitely the most spectacular fall she'd ever experienced. Before she could react, the young lady landed in the strong arms of a handsome young man. He saved her, catching her just as she was about to hit the ground. In that moment, a spark definitely ignited deep inside her. Lucia was captivated. The man was very worried about her, but she just said she wanted to help the cat. It turned out the cat didn't need any help at all and climbed down the tree safe and sound on its own. So His Highness was curious. Did Miss Lucia need to be somewhere, or would she prefer to just stay in his arms? She was extremely embarrassed, apologized, and started to climb down, telling him he could let go. It was her fault. She shouldn't have climbed a tree in heels. Luckily, she only tore her sleeve. Since she called him sir, His Highness had a feeling that she hadn't forgotten him after all. But Lucy had no idea who this knight was, or if he was close to the real Lucia. Luckily, the man was just teasing her, because he was sure she wouldn't forget her future brother-in-law. So he was the Crown Prince's younger brother, Leonardo Felix, the Crimson Lion, a cold and ruthless general. He was just a background character in the story, barely mentioned, but he was described as a cruel guy, a savage warrior. After recognizing him, Lucia curtsied, but Leo took her hand to kiss it. Just then, a woman's voice called out. Lady Maria was calling for His Highness, saying the tutors were waiting. Her greeting to Miss Lucia was like a thunderclap that sent a shiver down my spine. Suddenly, the atmosphere turned icy. Leonardo promised he would return to them right after escorting Miss Lucia. On the way, he apologized for upsetting her, but said he just couldn't resist teasing her. She must have come here to see her beloved fiancé again and throw herself into the engagement. In fact, that wasn't the case. Lucy had nothing to do with the prince anymore. She had broken off the engagement today, so they wouldn't be seeing each other often anymore. She wouldn't be coming here like some kind of bridge, and she had no reason to anyway. It was time for Miss Lucy to go home. It was time to say goodbye. Before she left, Leonardo took one last look into her beautiful eyes to make sure she was okay. Miss Aurelius was fine. In fact, she felt better than ever. Gosh, what a long day. But aside from that little accident, everything went according to plan. Can you imagine what would have happened if I'd fallen? Thank goodness the second prince was there. He was so gentle, almost carefree. This was different from the novel, so maybe the female lead left something out. Next, she had to meet the other two characters, her stepbrothers Alexander and Theodore Aurelius. The family had adopted Lucia when she was just a child. Both boys were younger than her, but their father only had eyes for her. The Duke doted on his adopted daughter, spoiling her with whatever she wanted. She got it all. So while Lucia was showered with love, the brothers grew up in loneliness, becoming distant from their father. No wonder they hated her, which was really awful. So far, Lucy had only met the older one, Alexander. Theodore was at the Royal Academy and wouldn't be back anytime soon. In the novel, Alexander was portrayed as some kind of rebel who managed the territory when the Duke was away. He was usually busy, so avoiding him for the past 2 weeks had been easy. Although he was the one who saved Lucia when she first arrived here, she couldn't remember all the details, but it seemed he was worried about his sister at the time. Even so, it didn't matter. Lucy wasn't the person he thought she was. She needed to keep her distance. That shouldn't be hard, since the older brother barely left his study, and the younger one wasn't home anyway. Lucy had been hoping everything would be fine, but shortly after arriving, she realized it wasn't. Theodore had come home unexpectedly, but unfortunately, Mr. Alexander couldn't join us. According to Linda, they hadn't expected to see Mr. Theodore for at least a few months. He was supposed to show up after the royal engagement ceremony, but now this was just too awkward. Since they hadn't seen each other in a long time, Lucy decided to say something to welcome her younger brother back. Just then, Theodore jumped up from the table. The maid thought he didn't like the food. The truth was, he wasn't hungry at all. He had no appetite. Theodore said he was going to his study and told her to tell his brother not to bother him. That guy never brought anything good. Alex was suddenly much calmer. The girl remembered the maid saying Alexander would be back late. A short while later, Alexander got his dinner, and Miss Lucia asked for it to be sent to his room. It's been 2 weeks. Reading a book inside a book. This is too confusing. Lucia couldn't live like this anymore. She felt like she was going crazy. Every time she stepped out of her room, she'd run into one of the brothers, so she'd been hiding for 2 weeks. Lucy had explored every nook and cranny of this room. She just needed to get out. She needed to get some fresh air, but Linda couldn't stand the thought of her going out alone with all the thieves outside. The maid suggested she at least take a carriage, but Lucia couldn't do that if she wanted to keep it from His Highness. Before leaving the manor, she told Linda to keep it a secret and promised to be back soon. The girl headed to her happy place, a place deeply etched in her memory. A fairy tale town where fabrics, fresh bread, and oven-baked sweets were sold on every corner. It was so full of life here, as if there were no pain or suffering. The people were happy and carefree. Lucia was glad to be back, and this bright, lively town made her feel good. She even forgot she was in a novel and never thought she'd say something like that. People usually read books to escape reality, not the other way around. The problem was, for these people, this wasn't a story, it was their real life, and now it was her life too. At this little shop, a girl was selling strawberries she had picked this morning. Strawberries were Lucia's favorite, so she decided to buy a whole bag. It was a perfect day. She felt like she could pretend she was on vacation, just spending an ordinary day in a strange place. Spending the whole day sightseeing, Lucia did everything she had dreamed of, eating delicious local food, buying sweets and fresh bread, and just wandering around. But the more people she saw, the more she felt like she didn't belong. Completely alone, so she stayed out late. Finally, night fell. It had been a crazy day. Although it was pleasant and fun, somehow Lucia started to feel lonely. She definitely missed her old life. It wasn't a fairy tale, but it was her life. And now she didn't know how to get back. Out of nowhere, 3 guys appeared and hit on the beautiful lady, wondering what she was doing alone in such a dangerous place. Lucy decided to get away as fast as she could, but the guys followed her, trying to get her party with them. You didn't need to be a mind reader to know what these scoundrels were thinking. It was written all over their faces. The young lady's resistance annoyed them, so the guy decided to force her to go with them. Lucy gathered her strength and broke free from his filthy hands, but she miscalculated and lost her balance. As if by magic, she fell right into the arms of a handsome stranger who held her gently. His touch was so gentle yet confident, his stern gaze locked right onto her eyes. Seeing the extra person, the street thugs immediately warned him to back off, saying she was his woman. But Lucy declared that she didn't know these men and was definitely not his woman. The tension was palpable. It seemed the stranger scared off the thugs with just a death glare. Luckily, the scumbags fled immediately, leaving no trace behind. When Lucy went to thank her savior, she noticed he was already gone. Seeing him in the distance, the girl chased after him, and just then, the man figured she should be fine. She used her last bit of strength to catch up to the stranger and thank him, saying she would have been in real trouble if it weren't for him. The strange guy was a man of few words, only saying he didn't do anything before continuing on his way. To be honest, that was true. He just stood there, and the scoundrels ran off. The man looked a bit intimidating, but Lucia felt safe next to him at this moment. The man really wondered why this girl kept following him. Out of curiosity, she started asking if he was a knight and if he planned on becoming one. In his eyes, this girl was a total daydreamer. He just said that knights get paid well. Getting attacked by 3 men and then following a stranger into the forest, this was just asking for trouble. Just then, Lucia realized he wanted to be a knight for the money. She had plenty of money, but no knight. Once in the forest, besides the sound of the wind and the hooting of owls, the man heard some very suspicious rustling. He couldn't just leave her out here alone, so he offered to walk her home. Just then, an owl swooped down to catch a mouse, scaring the lady so much that she jumped right into the stranger's arms. They both fell to the ground, and the girl immediately started talking about him wanting to be a knight. If he really wanted to be one, Lucy proposed that he become her knight. She promised to pay him 4 times the standard rate if he agreed to be her personal knight. But all she got in return was a shocked look from the man, who clearly had no idea what was going on. As she expected, the offer caught his attention. So Lucy took his silence as a yes. 4 times the salary, with room and board included. She told him to follow her so she could take him to his new workplace. At this point, Alexander had already heard that Lucia had gone out for a walk in town this morning. The whole thing struck him as odd, because Lucia hated walking around town. Linda confessed that she had insisted the young lady take a carriage, but she wanted to go alone and asked her to keep it a secret. All this chatter was making the room too noisy, distracting Theodore from his reading. He remarked that it seemed Lucy wasn't planning on doing anything drastic. It was terrible that this was all he could say in this situation, with his sister's fiancé here and no one, yet knowing they had broken off the engagement. The first thing Alexander did was send Linda to check Lucia's room to see if she had returned. The Crown Prince was genuinely surprised that the girl hadn't told anyone about them yet, thinking she was stalling because she still had feelings for him. Just then, the person everyone was worried about appeared. Lucia timidly walked into the office. Seeing his sister, Alexander's heart skipped a beat. Right now, nothing mattered to him but her. He grabbed her by the shoulders and pulled her close. He looked as if he'd seen a ghost. He was extremely agitated, his eyes darting around, his voice trembling as he fired off a million questions. But through it all, Lucia saw only one thing. It felt like a dream, but Alexander was genuinely worried. He couldn't believe she would even consider going to town alone and coming back so late. What was she thinking? Even though Lucia said she was fine, Alexander reminded her again how dangerous it had been lately. Sensing something was wrong, the knight pulled her away from her stepbrother and held her tight. Everyone was stunned. Like a ray of sunshine, the young man enveloped the girl in his warmth and protection, the kind that made you want to melt into it. It was time for Lucia to introduce her new knight to everyone, starting with her brothers. The atmosphere grew tense as the Crown Prince approached the young lady, wanting to find out if this business with the knight was true. She just wanted to protect herself, but she never expected things to turn out like this. Lucia had just broken off her engagement with this guy today, and now he'd left something at her house. She tried to ask him directly, but the Crown Prince ignored her question and asked again about the knight. This guy's name was Arthur Felix, and he was the first Crown Prince of the Empire. Arthur didn't recall the young lady ever mentioning a knight, so he figured she must be very confident in his abilities. Then Lucia declared that she knew the man very well, even though it was a complete lie. The girl had some nerve. She didn't even know his name, and he suspected she didn't even remember him. Still, her confidence was somewhat comical. It seemed Arthur really had a problem with the knight, and he suddenly asked Lucia to take a walk with him in the garden. The Crown Prince was almost certain she would agree, so he told Alexander he would come back to finish their talk next time. Surprisingly, the girl agreed to talk. Before leaving, she left the knight there, telling him to connect with the two boys. It was late, and the stars lit up the sky. The royal garden looked especially beautiful at this hour. This was so awkward. They had been wandering in silence for 15 minutes. Lucia was starting to think the Crown Prince was giving her the silent treatment and didn't understand why he'd asked her out if he wasn't going to say anything. It was getting on her nerves, so she had to say something. And the best way to start a conversation was to talk about the weather. She was just about to say how nice the weather was when a cold north wind suddenly blew, ruining all her plans. Before that, the weather had been perfect. This was too much. The wind was blowing fiercely, messing up her hair. Arthur could hear Lucy's teeth chattering from a cold. Like a complete fool in love, the Crown Prince took off his cape and wrapped it around her so she wouldn't freeze. It had gotten really cold outside. He told her she should go back. Arthur looked straight into Lucy's eyes, his gaze full of affection. He wanted to see her again later. Before leaving, he wished her a good night. His words, carried on the cold wind, sent a shiver down her spine. After all that, Lucia was completely baffled. She couldn't figure out why the Crown Prince was there in the first place, and why he was acting so strangely. He couldn't possibly actually like her, right? Thinking about it, she figured she must have hit her head or something, but then she remembered it wasn't a tree she had hit. Just like her knight had to stay by her side, right? Deep down, Lucy knew this. Looking back now, she realized she hadn't even introduced herself. Her name was Lucia, and, as she already knew, the guy's name was Sir Noah. As he pointed out, it turned out they were already quite acquainted. Remembering that, Lucia apologized for the lie, saying things just got a little out of hand. She told the butler to show Noah to his room, as it was late and he must be tired. It was getting colder outside. The chill returned, rustling the autumn leaves as if winter were on its way. Before the lady could react, the knight silently and carefully draped his cloak over her. There was no doubt now, he was truly an upright knight. Falling leaves can symbolize a love for life through their ability to be reborn, like the emergence of new life. This morning, Miss Aurelius received an invitation to the royal banquet. Linda was told that the young lady's dress would be ready tomorrow, so there was still time for adjustments. Of course, they had to pick out the perfect jewelry and accessories to go with the dress. Linda was naturally supporting her with all her heart. If only she knew the prince was planning to announce their breakup at the banquet. Considering he couldn't stand Lucia at all, His way of enjoying it wasn't hard to understand. It would all happen soon. Besides, now she had him her knight. He had been secretly protecting Lucia for weeks, yet had barely said a word. She wasn't quite sure what a knight was supposed to do, but figured it was something like a bodyguard. The truth was, the girl did feel very safe around him. Plus, she had been falling a lot lately, so she needed a strong man to lean on. A gentle breeze blew up the silk scarf Lucia was using to cover her head. The scarf flew high into the air, and coincidentally, the wind blew it over to Theodore. In that instant, a flash of fear crossed the man's eyes, as if he had seen a snake. His visit was a surprise, and Linda offered him some tea. Although the weather was nice, the atmosphere was unusually oppressive. Thunder and lightning clashed, as if accusing them of their tense relationship, like an ominous sign. Despite this, Lucia couldn't hide from her brother forever. She had to find out if he wanted some tea. Theodore didn't understand at all why he should drink tea, and he snatched the scarf and threw it on the ground. In fact, he couldn't even bear to look at his stepsister. Hearing these words clearly hurt Lucia, and she felt a sting whenever the matter was brought up. The sky instantly turned dark, and thunder rumbled. "Miss, you must return to the mansion." A storm was coming. A flock of black crows, sensing the rain, flew away. Lucia returned to the palace along with them. Sir Noah picked up the fallen scarf and felt a chill, as if he had personally felt all of the lady's pain. This strange girl and the fate she faced were both inexplicably reflected in her knight. Before the cold wind could snatch the scarf away, Noah held it tightly to his chest. The weather was getting worse and worse. Theodore pushed open the window, inhaling the scent of the coming rain, and stared at the gloomy sky. Having tea with her was utter nonsense. This child had no idea what trick she was playing. Now, she suddenly wanted a valiant knight. Previously, whenever her father made a similar suggestion, she would fly into a rage. Lucia had changed a lot since then. She had become so different. But when he thought about her changes, the child just seemed like a joke. Theodore firmly believed that people don't change, especially someone like her. In the middle of the storm, a messenger bird suddenly flew in through the window. Someone had sent a letter at a time like this. When Theodore saw the sender's name, he was very surprised. How strange. It was a letter from Lucia. Her room was right next to his. She could have just walked over instead of sending a falcon. The moment the boy opened the letter and read its contents, he was completely speechless. He froze on the spot, unable to even hold the letter in his hand. Lucia had sent a letter to her dear father and brothers. Of course, they were heartbroken over her recent disappearance. The day had started off well. She had set out to see the crown prince again, eager to see him as soon as possible. But the carriage never arrived, and an accident happened in the forest along the way. Lucia, beautiful and of high birth, was abducted by some scoundrels who wanted to make a fortune off her. At that time, she was terrified, felt trapped, and was unsure if she would make out alive. After drifting at sea for many days, they finally reached somewhere, probably in the north of the kingdom. Somehow, Lucy managed to escape after getting ashore. But she didn't get far before she collapsed, exhausted, cold, and alone. In the forest, a desperate Lucia had resigned herself to her fate, thinking she might never see them again. Just when she thought all hope was lost, Aaron appeared. He helped bandage her injured ankle and let her stay at his home until she recovered. If it weren't for that man, Lucy might not be in this world anymore. Around him, feeling his consideration and understanding, she felt safe and protected. Before Aaron took care of her, when she was sick, she had never experienced the feeling of being truly loved. He was kind, considerate, and warm. He taught Lucy to find beauty in the little things, and she fell deeply in love with him. He became the man she wanted to spend the rest of her life with. So the girl decided to stay there and marry Aaron and announce the cancellation of her engagement. Realizing what he had read, Theodore initially thought it was some kind of joke. This couldn't be true. Lucy had no sense of humor at all. Theodore was sure she wouldn't make this kind of joke. Besides, it really did look like her handwriting. But if this was true, and Lucia had really married someone else out there, then the question was, who is this girl? Everything went smoothly today, and Lucia finally received the invitation to the royal banquet. Her plan was moving forward, and soon everyone would know that Lucia and the crown prince were breaking up. Her second brother couldn't stand her, and she didn't even know how to act in front of him. She tried to be nice, but it only disgusted him. But she couldn't really blame him. It was all too messy. Theodore hated the real Lucia, and he had no idea that she and this girl were not the same person. But even if he found out, things probably wouldn't get any better. Theodore found it absurd that someone would go to such lengths to impersonate Lucia. It seemed pointless. Thinking about this, Theodore suddenly realized that Lucia was destined to be the next queen. A girl who looked exactly like the future queen was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and someone could surely take advantage of that. If that's the case, then it's impossible to be sure if the kidnapping was just an accident. If Lucia really wrote that letter, it means we've been living with an imposter all this time. Theodore decided to talk to Alexander about this, as this girl could cause trouble. But just as he stepped out of his room, he ran into Lucia in the hallway. Looking at her, it was hard to believe she wasn't Lucia. She looked exactly like her. She casually asked her brother if he wanted a cup of cocoa on this lovely evening, but she acted completely different, like a changed person. In reality, the girl regretted asking him. She had already messed up her answers many times. In fact, Theodore didn't want to do this, but had to be absolutely sure. Suddenly, he started getting closer and closer, which really scared her, and the atmosphere grew tense. When Theodore suddenly hugged Lucia tightly, she couldn't even say a word. It was the first time, just as he thought. There was no scar on her back, so this was definitely not Lucia. When the man pushed the girl away, she suddenly threw herself back into his arms. Lucia was so happy, she just didn't want to let go. This was now the best day ever. Lucy held on to her brother with all her might, so tightly that he had no idea what she was doing. She couldn't believe this was happening. Theodore just wanted a hug. It was so sweet. A million questions swirled in the man's mind. After all this, he was starting to think that even this Lucia was acceptable. Back in her bedroom, the girl noticed a silk scarf hanging on the doorknob, the one she had forgotten in the garden. She figured Linda must have had it washed and tied it there beautifully. It was only now that Sir Noah finally realized Lucy didn't remember him. He needed to tell her soon, but he didn't know how she would react. Before he met her, his life was a completely different picture. He worked for his boss, fixing roofs, cleaning chimneys, and running errands everywhere. From sunrise to sunset, the boy worked his fingers to the bone, moving boxes, sweeping chimneys, doing whatever they told him to do. It looked like it was going to rain now. This lake, it was where Theodore first saw her. Wherever she was, he just hoped she was doing well. Sir Noah started his morning work early, chopping firewood and stacking it neatly. He still needed to save a lot of money. He even pawned his sword. Staying in an inn was too expensive, so the boy had to sleep in the forest again. He might never see her again, but he longed to know where she was now. Noah had been working nonstop to save money, and after 2 weeks, he was completely exhausted. Today was absolutely exhausting. He would give anything to rest at an inn tonight. On his way back from another odd job, he saw a young woman being harassed by local thugs. She wanted nothing to do with them, so Noah couldn't just leave her there. He rescued the beautiful girl with his own hands, making sure she was safe. That's how they met again. But Noah didn't know how to bring it up. He had missed his chance, and now it would be even harder to explain everything. But she would surely remember him eventually. Then there was the possibility that Lucy might think he was a complete jerk. The boy needed this job. He could never save enough money just by fixing roofs and chopping wood for nobodies. For someone like him, becoming a knight was basically impossible. Noah had been preparing for this his whole life. And to be honest, it was the easiest and best paying job. All he had to do was escort Lucy, and she was so sweet. Lucia couldn't believe Theo had done that. It was so sudden. Although she had expected him to fly into a rage, his drastic change in attitude was indeed a bit suspicious. It was probably no big deal. After all, he was still a teenager, and he even let her hug him back. Lucy didn't know what Linda had used to wash the scarf. It smelled wonderful. It was a fairy tale-like building, with architectural details blending perfectly with nature, and sculptures that were the icing on the cake. The owner's favorite client visited one of these magical places, and when she appeared, it was as if even the flowers bloomed more brightly. When she saw Lucia, the lady beamed with joy. She had heard about the accident a few months ago. The proprietress had been in the western part of the kingdom for a long time, so she had only just found out. Thank goodness Miss Lucia was much better now. It was all in the past now. Now that it was all over, she must be very much looking forward to what was next. The proprietress had been preparing her outfits for months, especially the wedding dress, which was definitely her most stunning and greatest work. She couldn't wait for the world to see it. Lucia felt guilty because the proprietress had spent months finishing the veil. She had sewn every single bead by hand and had to turn down many ladies to create all of Lucia's dresses. Linda was sure everyone wanted to look their best at the annual banquet. It was a big event, which naturally required the best designer like Madame Juliet. Linda was right. The nobles apparently looked forward to this every year. It was a great opportunity to present oneself to high society, to find future business partners or marriage prospects. The novel was said to have started with a royal wedding, which was why Lucy felt the banquet was never mentioned. Miss Aurelius was Madame Galet's favorite client, so picking a dress was a breeze, especially since she was to become queen. It was now time to reveal the designer banquet gown. Lucy could barely breathe in it. After a closer look, Madame Goulet suddenly announced that something was off. The dress was perfect, but it wasn't her style. That wouldn't do, so she called over the boys and had them bring out another pile of dresses to choose from. Of course, there were countless outfits to choose from. As we were saying, Miss Aurelius enjoyed VIP treatment here. The boys all liked the lady. They thought she was hot and didn't hide their admiration. When she came out, hearing those words, Sir Noah wondered if he should, lock the door. The knight decided to handle it himself, and he carefully crept towards the door, trying not to look inside. But the moment he looked up, he froze. He held his breath, his heart pounding in his chest from pure astonishment. Almost instantly, Noah slammed the door shut, trying to recover from the lady's breathtaking beauty. He closed his eyes and pictured her again, his face and ears instantly turning beet red. As Linda was helping the lady change into a new dress, she suddenly noticed her scar was completely gone. Hearing this, Lucy froze in shock. She had never even heard of any scar. The scar had completely healed, and for some reason, Linda was only noticing it now. Now, she was sure the ointment she had been using had finally worked its magic. The maid had heard legends about the herbalist and her ointment, but she never thought it would work so quickly. The scar was completely gone. This news made Madame Galliette very happy. She was glad Miss Lucy could finally wear her hair up. The real Lucia had a scar, as she didn't even know. She was so lucky. Things could have been much worse. The Aurelius brothers were already late. Alexander thought they didn't have time to wait for her. He and his younger brother had to go first, prepare another carriage for Lucia. How strange. Lucia was late. She was usually quite fast at getting ready. It seemed he and his little brother would get some time alone. It had been a long time since the two of them were alone together. Theodore was silent the whole time. His gaze grew cold and deep, as if he was waiting for something. After all the crazy things that had happened, Alexander seemed completely unaware. But they had to leave anyway. After the Aurelius brothers left, the servants scurried around the palace, returning to their posts. When Madame Linda returned, she was surprised to hear that the young masters had already left. According to the maid, young Master Alexander was worried about being late, so they were preparing another carriage for Lucia. What needed to be done had to be done. Linda wanted the carriage to go around to the back door. They were short on time. During this period, Madame Galet had been meticulously preparing a grand social event for her favorite client. Linda was worried the lady would be late if they didn't hurry. So Galet's butler, Lorenzo, decided to peek his head in and ask how much longer it would be. It was a beautiful wonderland, and even a beauty queen knows perfection can't be rushed. She needed to finish her work, but the butler asked her to hurry up. The imperial palace, ready to welcome its guests, was a perfect architectural masterpiece, a blend of luxury and history. Finally, the Aurelius family carriage stopped in front of the palace. Miss Aurelius was very late, but before going in, Lucia suddenly stopped, as if she had a feeling she had forgotten something. She had indeed forgotten. The girl needed the final touch. Madame Galet had planned everything with that feather shawl. She bet the prince wouldn't be able to take his eyes off Lucy. Damn, she looked beautiful. A warm feeling spread through her heart. Everyone was so kind, and she was deeply grateful for it. Lucy was actually quite popular here, maybe not with the main characters, but there were people who cared about her. It no longer mattered if she was as bad as the book said, because she wasn't going to be here for long anyway. She wouldn't have anything to do with the main characters or these people anymore. She needed to focus on getting out of this godforsaken place. Lucy's intuition was right. She had forgotten to bring something. Noah had been waiting for her to show up, and not knowing where she was, he decided to ask a maid when Miss Lucia was leaving. It turned out the lady had left about 20 minutes ago. She was very late because she had spent a long time getting ready. Of course, she wanted to look absolutely stunning today. Hearing from the maids that her fiancé would also be there, Noah froze. She hadn't been to the palace in weeks, so the girls were betting she was eager to see him. Noah was speechless. He didn't know what to say. This was the first time he had heard she was engaged. The carriage broke halfway there. The butler thought he could fix it, but there was little he could do out here. Under the circumstances, Lucia decided to ask how far the manor was, thinking she could walk. The butler couldn't let that happen. He said these forests were full of bandits and wild beasts. He took all the blame, thinking he should have been more careful. But Lucia didn't think Sir James was at fault. The most important thing was that everything would be all right. Honestly, it was a disaster. She was already late, and at this rate, she might miss the announcement entirely. It seemed she couldn't get home, nor could she reach the manor. It was too dangerous to walk alone. It was only now that Lucy realized she had forgotten to bring Noah like an idiot. She had actually forgotten a whole living person, and her knight at that. He was probably still waiting on the mansion steps, and would surely be furious that she had forgotten him like this. Just then, like a ray of sunshine piercing through the slums, Sir Noah appeared, riding at full speed. James was very relieved to see him, and explained that the carriage wheel was broken. He left Noah with the lady before going to get help, but the knight was more worried about the broken wheel. He immediately started to panic, wondering if she was hurt. Lucia immediately ran to him happily, looked straight into his eyes, and grabbed his shirt. He was finally here, and she felt much calmer now. Having him around made her feel safe. Lucia looked truly beautiful today. Just one look at her, and Noah's heart started pounding in his chest. Despite that, he calmed himself down and asked if she was hurt. Lucy felt very guilty and started apologizing for her carelessness. To have forgotten him. She was in such a hurry this morning. Plus, Madame Galet took a long time with her makeup and hair. Then she was late to begin with. Then the carriage broke down, and she and Sir James were stranded here. The problem was, she absolutely could not miss this banquet. The prince was probably waiting to announce their breakup, so Noah didn't hesitate to take off his gloves and wrap his arm tightly around her waist. He lifted her onto the horse and told her not to worry. He promised to get Lucy there on time. Her amazing, valiant knight. Come to think of it, this wasn't so bad. Miss Aurelius had never ridden a horse before. It was higher than it looked, but it was okay. Noah was right behind her, so it wasn't scary. She was glad he was there. She was less panicked when he was around. Still, she felt bad for leaving him like that. Good thing he didn't seem angry. Lucia thanked him for coming, but saw that his expression was very stern. To be honest, the whole thing was very awkward for Noah, even though it wasn't the first time he had run into her. But he still couldn't figure out why he was so flustered. He had never seen Lucia like this before. He felt that she was relieved to see him after the carriage got stranded. She was terrified of missing the event. It must be a big deal. Or maybe she was upset about missing her sweetheart. Noah didn't even know she had a fiancé. Either way, it was none of his business. He was just doing his duty. It was hard to keep telling himself that when Lucia was sitting so close, as if on purpose. Noah could faintly smell her enchanting perfume. When she turned to thank him, he hadn't expected it to be like that. Just one look at her, that incredible beauty, that amazing figure, and he felt like he was going to fall apart. In reality, this was all too awkward. But hey, it would be over soon. Ahead was the magnificent view of the lavish grounds surrounding the imperial palace. By then, the guests had already gathered at the banquet, remarking that the prince looked even more radiant than usual today. The prince had to bear the wedding congratulations alone. Everyone knew how long Miss Lucia had waited for this day. Meanwhile, as a member of the council, Duke Charles told Prince Arthur to make sure to leave a good impression on the ambassadors. The Duke explained the empire's situation and current state, but all Arthur could think about was where she was. The coronation, the wedding, and the alliance with the Western Kingdom, all eyes were on them. The alliance wanted them to be especially careful right now, so Charles ordered him to ensure the banquet went smoothly. Lucia was never late, and Arthur needed to have a serious talk with her about it. At the banquet, he ran into Lady Asteria and noticed she was in a good mood. The nobles said Lady Asteria was doing very well. Her niece had been living with them for the past few months, so she was very happy. Aunt Beatrice's niece, the young Clare, was also at the ball tonight. She's quite a beauty. Clare has really grown up. The last time we ladies saw her was at Aunt Beatrice's wedding. She was just a child back then, only 17. Clare hadn't expected to be here, but she was hoping to meet him. Not wanting to waste any time, she asked her aunt if she could walk around. The lavish party was in full swing. This year's banquet was said to be the most extravagant one in history. Everyone was dismayed by the princess's absence, and no one had seen the second prince either. Everyone knew the second prince wasn't interested in such occasions. At least everyone was hoping to see the marquise's niece. She was making her social debut now. Clare was completely focused on finding a specific man. She was looking for him everywhere. She was sure he had to be around here somewhere, so she tirelessly searched the entire courtyard. The moment their eyes met, she felt as if she were floating on air, and everything else faded out of sight. It was him, exactly as she had imagined, tall and impressive. Her heart skipped a beat when he seemed to suddenly spot her and walk in her direction. She hadn't expected it to happen so quickly. He must have recognized her. Until the last second, Clare thought they were finally going to meet, but the encounter turned to dust, fleeting and meaningless. All her hopes, her dreams ignited by a young love, were completely shattered in that instant. The prince chose a girl of irresistible beauty. Miss Lucia was as gorgeous as ever. She was the darling of high society, and the guests immediately surrounded her like a pack of wolves, asking all sorts of questions. Miss Aurelius was flattered that the ladies were dreaming of visiting the Aurelius estate one last time before she left. To be honest, she hadn't expected so many people and hoped no one would notice she wasn't a real Lucia. But her intuition told her that if she had read the book, she would have known how Lucia behaved in high society. Apparently, it was sad for her to leave her childhood home, but they imagined she was excited about her new life in the imperial palace. Of course, as the council members believed, she had been preparing for this for years. The man across from her was quite imposing. He had heard that Lucia had been very ill recently and was bedridden. The court hoped to see an heir immediately after the wedding, so the lady's health was important to them. It seemed they knew nothing about the annulment of the engagement. Lucia decided to lay her cards on the table, but then the prince kissed her hand. There was no need to rush things. The most important thing was that the lady was here and in good health. It was wonderful to see the future king and queen getting along so well. Lucia looked annoyed. She really wanted to talk to His Highness in private. Sir Noah always stayed in his lady's shadow, letting her shine in public. She was like the sun. Her energy, spirit, and warmth lit up everyone's lives, like a star warming the earth. But the sun is so distant, as it should be. That's where it belongs. And Noah was also where he belonged, forever in the background, slowly following the sun like a shadow. Their meeting left a deep impression on the guests. They couldn't remember the prince ever acting like this. Among everyone at the banquet, it seemed only Miss Clare noticed that this girl looked exactly like Lucia. The weather was nice today. Prince Arthur took his fiancé to the pond to talk, away from prying eyes. He didn't dare to speak first, but he noticed Lucia looked very unhappy. Judging by her expression, she wanted to kill someone, or she had already figured out how. Suddenly, she asked His Highness when he planned to start a family, referring to his comment about not needing to rush. Arthur was completely baffled by this conversation, feeling at a loss. He had actually wanted to say something, but the lady was delayed and he couldn't find her. A flash of confusion crossed Lucia's eyes. They had talked about this weeks ago, and Arthur had promised her. He had promised their engagement would be called off today. He said he would take care of it. Noah overheard every word, and in that instant, something inside him shifted. Now, not only was the council unaware, but they even thought they wanted to start a family. The truth was His Majesty didn't want to marry her either. It's just that something came up. Hearing this, Lucia became very agitated, thinking something must have gone wrong. In the book, this happened right at the beginning. Now things had changed. She demanded an immediate explanation from the crown prince. You could hear the anxiety in her voice. He moved closer, making Lucia panic about why all this was suddenly happening. Arthur wanted to explain what had happened, and he trembled as if something something terrible had occurred, holding his bride's hand. Whether it was a lack of courage or some other reason, the crown prince couldn't bring himself to confess everything. He invited Lucia and her brothers to stay for a few days, and now he had to go back, but he promised to explain everything later. Bumping into Noah was sudden, but not unexpected. Arthur deliberately brushed past, bumping his shoulder. He just wanted to let the knight know his place in the hierarchy. With every step, Arthur felt worse. He felt his body begin to sway. More than ever, he didn't want this to happen again. He was just so tired. Lucia, the woman who had once loved him with all her heart. It pained him to think that Arthur was now so unattractive to her that the thought of their engagement filled her with anger. She looked petrified, but the crown prince didn't even realize why Lady Lucia's expression had changed so drastically, or why he was so bothered by it. Lucia was overwhelmed with sadness after seeing her fiancé. Noah might have wanted to help her, but there was nothing he could do. The fact was that he didn't belong here. No one would blame the sun for shining on someone else, right? Lucia didn't understand what had just happened. Today was supposed to be the end of everything. She thought she had done the right thing, keeping silent and waiting for everyone to discover the truth today. But he had done nothing. The girl tried to tell herself she was fine. She was convinced there was a logical explanation for all of this. Of course, that wasn't the case. Today had not gone according to plan. It was supposed to be different. It looked like a storm was brewing. The weather in spring was always so unpredictable. This morning had been warm and pleasant. Clare had completely forgotten about her. She looked exactly the same. But if her intuition was right, then everything would change. Arthur didn't recognize Clare either. He should have remembered her, but it was as if he hadn't seen her at all. She desperately wanted to believe that he couldn't possibly be in love with Lucia. Finally, Aunt Beatrice found her niece and asked if she had seen her cousin Henry. Edmund wanted to introduce him to the members of the council, but the aunt couldn't find the fool anywhere. Even now, Clare didn't understand why she should be worried about this. After all, she was the main character. The banquet was not so pleasant for everyone. The second son of Aurelius had just been publicly humiliated. Suddenly, he ran into some people who taught him a harsh lesson. He was no match for the three of them. The guy with the blood-red eyes was very annoyed by the way Theodore greeted his old friends. It was unbelievable. He was going to walk right past without so much as a greeting, as if he were superior to them. After Theodore confirmed his identity, Henry slapped him hard, making him regret it. So Aurelius thought graduating at the top of his class was a big deal, did he? Theodore didn't think so. Honestly, why would he bother competing with someone like Henry? The guy was a nobody, not worth his effort to contend with. Henry took those words too much to heart. It sent him into a rage, and he started punching and kicking the kid, really going too far. Fearing that Henry would actually kill him, his companions pulled him away and told him it was time to leave. Beaten half to death, Theodore was left alone, barely able to breathe, let alone call for help. He managed to get up, but tears streamed down his cheeks. He was really tired of this crap. Meanwhile, Lucia was returning to the palace, silent the whole way. When Noah finally decided to speak to her, she happened to see Theodore nearby. Seeing him sitting there alone, Lucia rushed over to see what was wrong. Just then, she saw the fresh bruises on his face, and a wave of worry washed over her. She grabbed his shirt and started asking him what had happened, asking if he was okay. Lucia could of course see that he was not okay, so she told Noah to hurry and get a doctor. She had never been so worried about her younger brother before, eager to know everything that had happened. Of all times for her to show up, he didn't need her help, it was none of her business. He said harshly, seeing how difficult it was for him to even move. She reached out her arm to support him. But even in that state, Theodore couldn't stand her help. He grabbed her wrist. A pained Theo told her not to get any ideas, or he would remind her what kind of game Lady Lucia was playing. Maybe she had forgotten, but she absolutely shouldn't forget that he was the son of a duke. He grabbed his sister's arm, squeezing with all his might, and angrily told her never to touch him so casually again. Noah was there in an instant, shielding her with his arm. He roughly grabbed Theodore, lifting him off the ground, his eyes flashing fiercely, filled with pure rage. If this guy dared to try anything, he was ready to risk it all. Just then, Lucia caught his attention. Since Theodore was injured, she asked him to let go. The knight immediately released his grip, letting go of the duke's son. Lucia then told him he was free to leave for the day. Although he was worried, she insisted she was fine and sent the young man away. Noah had no right to defy his mistress's orders and could only withdraw as quickly as possible. Walking away step by step, he really didn't want to leave. This conversation was only for the two of them. It was not to be spied on by outsiders. Now that Theodore knew everything, Lucia was terrified. She was about to break down, trying to figure out how he had found out and why he hadn't said anything. The kid bet she must be dying to know why he had let her play this deception in front of everyone for so long. The fact was he didn't care about her excuses at all, so Theo told her to save those words for the executioner. From the look on Lucia's face, she hadn't even considered that, as if there would be no retribution. Impersonating the crown prince's fiancé and the daughter of a duke, that was going too far. The High Court would never tolerate such deception. You can't make a fool of the ducal family, so she'd better enjoy her jewels and fancy clothes while she still can. Before Theo decided what to do with her, she had to shut up and stay away from him. Lady Lucia had no idea what would happen next, what to do, or even how to explain this mess. Today was supposed to have a different ending. She was supposed to break off the engagement and then find a way to leave this estate. But the problem was that Theo already knew. Lucy's mind was filled with questions. What would happen when Arthur found out? Would the real Lucia ever come back? How did things get to this point? Maybe deep down, she actually liked the people she was fooling, but she had just barged into the whole situation. Meeting Lady Aurelius in this forest, Leonardo sincerely hoped she wouldn't climb another damn tree. Lucia didn't expect to see Sir Leo here, but out of respect, she asked how he was doing. Not knowing if he also knew, she had no idea what to do next, which made her feel sick to her stomach. The moment the second prince touched her head, he magically knew she wasn't feeling well. He stared so intently into her eyes, as if he could see through to some deep, dark secret no one knew. As Lucia became flustered, Leo made a casual guess, wondering what was making this poor little thing so upset. It wasn't that at all. His Highness didn't make her nervous. They had known each other for a long time, even if they weren't close. Come to think of it, this was the longest conversation they'd ever had, the first being when Lucy asked to cancel the engagement. By the way, the annulment was supposed to happen today, but Lucy said the prince would explain everything. The second prince found it strange that he was hesitating, especially knowing he didn't like the idea of marrying Lucy from the start. There was nothing funny about it. The girl knew this. Arthur had already said so, but it was still very infuriating. Leonardo suddenly wondered where they were going, and honestly, Lucia didn't know either. She was just following him. The worst part was, she started to feel even worse, as if the day wasn't unlucky enough. Just as her stomach started to cramp, the second prince suddenly and confidently wrapped his arm around her waist and picked her up. He had a determined look, as if he knew the lady would be staying at their estate for a few days. Leo decided to carry her to her room, thinking she needed some rest. Obviously, Lucia couldn't walk on her own with that kind of pain, and Leo, worried about her, even offered to call a doctor. In reality, it wasn't a good idea. If someone saw them, rumors would surely spread, only making his situation worse. The pain was unbearable, very intense, but thank goodness, only Leonardo was around when it happened. As evening approached, a perfect opportunity arose, and guests began to leave the palace. Several hours had passed, and Noah couldn't find her anywhere. His only hope was that she hadn't passed out. He already regretted leaving her alone. If that little punk dared to lay a finger on her, he would make him regret it. Alexander also joined the search for Lucia. He firmly believed that Noah, as her knight, should be by her side at all times. Suddenly, a familiar fur coat flashed by. It turned out the lady had been with Leonardo all along. Apparently, Lady Lucia wasn't feeling well, so he offered to help and took her to the estate. The moment Noah heard Lady Lucia was sick, he rushed out without a second thought. Alexander found this absurd. The way the man Lucy had found just ran off like that. After that incident, she hired a personal knight. Alexander thought it was because she needed a sense of security. He dug up all the information he could about him, and besides the fact that he had never served as a knight, he found nothing suspicious. Lord Aurelius thought he should trust Her Highness. It's just that her knight was so strange. It turned out Arthur had actually seen him too on the very first night. Lucy introduced him. It was a splendid banquet. The council was very grateful to the ambassador for coming all the way from the empire. During the conversation, the crown prince's gaze couldn't leave his arrogant younger brother. He was clearly wearing Lucy's fur, but Arthur couldn't understand why. Rumor has it that the princess has arrived in the Western Kingdom and is preparing to marry Prince Julius. He is the emperor's only nephew, so the ambassadors were sure they knew what this meant for their future. At that moment, Arthur decided to say he had something else he wanted to discuss with the council. His Highness immediately interrupted him and said they were also looking forward to this alliance. The fleet is said to have docked this morning. The Aurelius family is endlessly grateful for the Emperor's generosity. One of the council members said it was just a token of their gratitude. They also thought the gift sent would be helpful to the Emperor. Suddenly, he mentioned Sir Arthur's situation. Things would soon come to a head. Hearing this, the first prince lowered his head, as if the council member had touched a sore spot. Despite this, no one could know about the annulment. His wedding would surely proceed as planned. That evening, Lady Lucia's bath was ready. The second prince told the servants to leave her dinner in her room. After sending the maids away, she just wanted to be alone and relax. Lucia touched herself and suddenly had a realization. She remembered the scar, and now everything made sense. That's why Theodore had held her. He was looking for the scar, while she was expecting something else. She felt like a complete idiot. He had suspected her from the beginning. Lady Aurelius was so naive to think she could change everything. Now she just wanted to run away. But who knew what would happen then, or if she could find her way home? She didn't even remember how she got here. But underwater, she felt a hand touch her. The water gently enveloped her, and she curled up. It suddenly felt comfortable, his warm hand touching her almost ice-cold body. Water droplets slid down her face. She seemed to be sleeping peacefully. With his desperate cry, Lucia's body filled with life. Every cell in her body was revitalized, and then her body began to change color before her eyes. At that moment, she woke up, realizing with horror that it was all a memory. How on earth Lucia Aurelius got here? Honestly, she had no clue. The last thing she remembered was running through the forest and then falling. But for some reason, she was sure it was a memory of drowning, but someone had pulled her out. Everything was blurry, but if Lucy could figure out how she got here, she could surely find her way back to where she belongs. Remembering her mother's words that she didn't belong here, she wondered if anyone was looking for her, if anyone at home missed her. Suddenly, there was a sound of knocking on the window from the street. Noah was trying to get her attention, throwing small stones at her window. Seeing him, Lucia was overjoyed, and her sad thoughts vanished in an instant. Her knight was throwing stones. It was so sweet. It was so romantic to think she could experience this. Not noticing the lady had already opened the window, Noah threw a stone that hit her right in the face. Speaking of romance, Lucia knew from the beginning that today was not her lucky day. Noah panicked, immediately climbed through the window into her room, his heart almost jumping out of his chest with worry. His face had never shown so much emotion. He looked like he was really blaming himself for what happened. But now Lucy was more interested in how he got up there, and so quickly. Noah claimed he didn't see the window was open. He cupped her face and started to check, wanting to see where the stone had hit. The guy was so close, Lucy could feel his breath. This girl in his hands was extraordinary. Her gaze seemed to drive Noah mad. But the moment the lady's nose started bleeding, everything turned into sheer panic. Lucia still couldn't believe he had hit her with a stone, but his expression was worse, even a little comical. She really wished Noah could have seen his own expression just now. The knight was on the verge of a breakdown, but looking at the beautiful lady, all he could think about was what was under that dress. After the bleeding stopped, Lady Aurelius decided to find out what her charming knight was doing here. But suddenly he grabbed Lucy's hand, and after seeing a large bruise, his expression changed instantly. Noah knew he would leave a mark, and the thought filled him with a vicious rage. This guy was being incredibly gentle, barely daring to touch her hand, afraid of hurting Lucy. He was so focused, you could even say he was sweating. He casually asked if Lucia planned to keep on like that, forgetting she had a knight. That memory wasn't a pleasant one. She had left the banquet with Leo. What the knight really wanted to say was that he didn't want to leave her alone, but she had told him to get lost. Lucy's younger brother seemed to be hurt, so he went easy on him. But if it happened again, Noah wouldn't hold back. The sun is so captivating. Its light dispels the darkness, making one crave it more each day. Every day with him would no longer be the same. It seemed to be just an addiction. It was getting late. Noah bowed and took his leave, saying the lady should go to sleep. Before he left, Lucia stopped him and thanked him for everything he had done for her. She told him not to worry about Theodore because he was still a child, and siblings sometimes fight. Lucia didn't want Noah to hurt him, or worse, get into trouble for disrespecting a noble like her. But Noah knew she was lying. It was his duty to protect the young lady. Surprisingly, the guy jumped straight down from the high balcony and walked away. Just then, Lucia's nose started bleeding again, but at least the night's intentions were good. The girl slept fitfully until morning. After such a difficult day, looking at her, Lady Maria couldn't bring herself to do what she had to do, feeling it was too wrong. Lucia woke up to the housekeeper's disgusted and judgmental gaze. No one had ever said good morning to her like that. It turned out the servants were there to get her ready for breakfast with the royal family. She and her brothers had been invited. The maids brought this dress, knowing the Duchess liked this style, and that was precisely the problem, she said. Today she just wanted to wear something less restrictive, loose, and simple. Lady Maria couldn't stand her. That little brat was always causing trouble, and now she wouldn't even wear the clothes given to her. Since Her Highness had no simple clothes, the housekeeper knew what she had to do. Knowing she herself had always wanted to wear this dress, she brought a silk robe that was very comfortable to wear. The Duchess was much more comfortable now. It was the most comfortable dress she had worn since coming to this world. Of course, it was perfect. The dress belonged to none other than the late Queen herself, and Lucy had always dreamed of wearing it. Since His Highness was very close to his mother, she must have thought he would want to see her in this outfit. You can imagine how angry Prince Arthur would be when he saw this, which desecrating his mother's memory. That housekeeper felt she was superior, unworthy of being in the same room as the Queen. Now it's time to go, miss. She didn't like being escorted anyway. Tomorrow's breakfast will be served in the second dining room. Lucia didn't know the way, but felt it might be better that they didn't tell her. She could find it herself. But in making this decision, she didn't realize how big the place was. There were over 100 rooms here. After finally reaching room 125, Lucia still hadn't found the second dining room. But in the room she had stumbled into, she saw a blood-stained handkerchief on the table. Just then, shouting was heard from the hallway. It sounded like the argument with Viscount Charles was getting heated. Arthur burst into the study, saying the princess needed to go home as soon as possible. The council believed she needed to marry the Western prince. It was her duty to the kingdom, and Arthur's job as her older brother was to ensure his sister's happiness. He was convinced she was miserable, and that Western prince was a despicable scoundrel. The truth is, it was a political marriage. Feelings were not a consideration. This marriage was crucial for the future of our country. Even if feelings were involved, there was no guarantee that interfering in Drackhelm's politics would be a wise move. Counselor Charles was unsure why the emperor would gift them an entire fleet. After hearing about this, Prince Arthur demanded an explanation for why he wasn't notified. He had sent an escort to the Western Kingdom, along with gifts. They should arrive at the capital within a few weeks. His Majesty decided to meet the ambassador tonight, but the council thought all his actions were reckless. The council members left, leaving the king alone. He wasn't acting like his usual self at all. Lucia didn't know what to do now. If Arthur found her hiding here, there would surely be big trouble. Seeing a window nearby, she decided to get out of there no matter what. So she slipped out onto the balcony, and the thought of jumping straight down like Noah crossed her mind. But just then, footsteps were heard, and Sir Arthur sensed someone else was there. The image of his dead mother flashed before his eyes, her in that dress forever etched in his memory. Tears of loss streamed down Arthur's face as memories came flooding back. When Lucia heard her brother's voice behind her, she stopped breathing. Finally, she was here. Out of fear, she was about to explain everything, but His Highness pulled her closer, holding her tightly. Tears are words that must be written. The silent language of the crown prince's emotions poured out to his mother. Feeling his mother's embrace after so many years, he felt a pang of remorse. He missed her so much, words couldn't describe it. Dealing with such emotions wasn't easy. Arthur couldn't go on. He had disappointed his mother. Seeing her brother faint in her arms, Lucia was terrified. She didn't understand why he was calling her mother. Things became very complicated. The girl immediately called for help, and servants arrived in an instant. It had been 4 days. His Majesty hadn't eaten or slept since receiving the letter from Princess Olden. Prince Arthur's right-hand man, his advisor and secretary, realized something else was tormenting him now. For now, it was just a slight fever and fatigue, but if the crown prince kept pushing himself like this, Augustus was sure they were done for. As his doctor, he would leave His Majesty some medicine to be taken before meals. But the most important thing now was rest. It was strange to see a fever in someone usually as strong as an ox. He must have pushed himself too hard. Lucia was worried something else was going on under the long-term stress and lack of sleep, so she decided to stay and look after him. Augustus was sure the young lady understood that nothing that happened here could leave this room. After getting her permission, he and Olden took their leave, as the prince needed to rest. Lucia didn't consider herself a biased person, feeling she was kind and considerate enough. But for some reason, she was already judging him for something he hadn't even done yet. This might be what he was trying to explain all along, but this whole mess wasn't in the original story at all. Maybe she didn't know all the details, but she definitely knew that Arthur had canceled the engagement without any trouble. She thought it was because she wasn't the real her, because she had interfered with the plot, and now the characters were acting differently. But the problem was, Arthur was no longer just some character. Lucy could see he was really suffering. Flowers are like nature's smile and the earth's music. Moreover, they remind you of important moments and feelings. They are a universal way to show love and remember things, like a person's true feelings. They are real. Flowers go hand in hand with love. Flowers are poems written by the earth with its heart, and love, like a flower, needs time to bloom. To love flowers is to love life. To love your loved ones, just like Arthur's love for his mother. Without love, he wouldn't have cried from the realization that he had failed his mom. He thought he had let her down, thought he wasn't ready to rule the kingdom, not worthy of being king. But his mom had always known what he was born to do. She was sure everything would be all right. Her dear little baby had nothing to fear as long as she was by his side. More than anything, Arthur didn't want his mom to leave. Without love, flowers wither, just like a child without a mother. With these thoughts swirling in his mind, His Majesty suddenly woke up and saw Lucia standing before him, looking just like his mother. She asked if her prince was feeling any better. The reason she was here was that she had been taking care of him. Arthur had suddenly fainted, so she was worried sick. He seemed to have a lot on his mind lately, but Lucy just hoped her prince would try not to be too stressed. She gently kissed his forehead and told him everything would be all right. Arthur's eyes shot open, realizing it was all just a dream. The prince felt like he was going crazy, unable to understand the dream. Seeing Lucia asleep beside him, he had no idea what she was doing there, or what had happened at all. But when he saw her wearing his mother's dress, rage took over. Arthur grabbed the girl and started shouting. Tears instantly streamed down Lucia's face, and she started begging for forgiveness without even opening her eyes. The thought of her crying in her sleep changed the crown prince's expression. All his anger seemed to vanish. He gently let go of her hand, careful not to wake her, but a question kept swirling in his mind. Why was she like this? This was supposed to be easy. Arthur never wanted this girl. He was doing this for his sister, for the kingdom. At the emperor's reception, Alexander had to apologize for his sister. She's usually never late. She seems to have changed a lot recently. She and Leonardo keep surprising me. The thing is, she's been a bit different ever since that incident. It's not surprising that Alexander was traumatized after that kidnapping incident. Considering what she went through, her carriage was destroyed, her entire retinue was killed by bandits, and only one made escape. And she was so traumatized she could no longer work at the estate. So you can imagine the effect this had on Lucia. It's normal for a person to change completely after an experience like that. When Arthur finally found her again, she was wearing an extremely bizarre outfit. But worse, she didn't recognize him at all. She was unconscious for several days, unable to distinguish what was real from what was illusory. The girl kept saying she wasn't the person Arthur was looking for, that she didn't belong here, that she was from another world. She kept insisting she wasn't Lucia, but another girl who called herself Lucy. Despite this, the doctor diagnosed her with a mental illness that couldn't be left to run wild. At the time, there was only one way to help her, and it seems that changed everything. Thank goodness. It's all over now, her memory has returned, and she's safe. Alexander still needed to tell his father about this after he returned from his important trip. Leonardo didn't even know any of this had happened, so he decided to ask about Arthur's situation. Alexander sent a message to His Highness as soon as he found her, so he was aware. Although he guessed the crown prince wouldn't visit, as His Majesty had more important things to attend to. Just then, Alden arrived. He said His Highness and the lady would not be joining them. It turned out Lady Lucia was having breakfast with Prince Arthur in his study. That news surprised everyone. It seems he also had more pressing matters today. Noah didn't even realize she had gone through something like that. After all, her brother had found her that day. It was a relief, but he still hoped to see Lucia this morning. In his daydreams, it was as if she and the crown prince had decided to uphold their engagement and get married that very afternoon. It sounded crazy, but it didn't matter to Noah. Who she married was none of his business. He was just a knight, and she was just a lady, nothing more. A very sweet and kind lady, but that wasn't the point. Beyond a sense of duty and a knight's honor, the boy was convinced he felt nothing else for her. He told himself he didn't care who she had breakfast with tomorrow, whether it was alone or with that blockhead. Noah was starting to feel like these thoughts were driving him crazy. The whole thing was a huge burden. Suddenly, he caught a glimpse of the lady, and a faint smile crossed his face. He decided to go see what she was up to. The knight was met with Lady Aurelius's heartbreaking gaze, her eyes full of tears and red from crying for so long. When Lucy opened her eyes again, she found herself in her grandmother's house in the city. For a moment, she thought she had gone back, that this had all been just a dream. But then she heard a familiar voice. The old woman hadn't expected to see the girl here. Lucy froze and decided to ask how her grandmother was doing, since it had been a while. But the old lady just repeated her question, wanting to know what this murderer was doing here. At the sound of that piercing scream, Lucia's eyes flew open in terror, her heart pounding as if it would burst. It was another dream, but the girl couldn't figure out why she had suddenly fallen asleep. Noticing the blanket on her, she suspected the crown prince had done it. But seeing Arthur sleeping soundly, Lucia slowly got out of bed, thinking a maid must have done it. She touched his forehead. The fever had broken, thank goodness. Just as the girl left, Arthur sat up, certain that she had been crying. Lucia then found herself in complete silence. The castle was lit by candles, but the atmosphere was still somewhat eerie. After everything that happened, the girl felt very strange and suddenly needed to go out for some fresh air immediately. The flowers, trees, and fountains that shot towards the sky in the royal garden reminded her of her childhood. Memories began to flood in, but Lucia begged them to stop. She didn't want to see them. Once, when she was a child, Lucia brought her mom some flowers. Dad said they were her mother's favorite because they looked like sunshine. Mom loved the flowers and was sure Lucia's little brother would love them too. The memory of kissing her young brother goodnight was tearing Lucia apart. She tried not to think about it. They weren't coming back. Time couldn't be turned back. It was all over. It was a true tragedy, a terrible accident that forever changed Lucia's destiny, turning her life into a complete nightmare. The pain of losing her loved ones consumed her, and Lucia was heartbroken, feeling a deep sense of guilt for what had happened to her parents. On that cursed day, Lucia was in desperate need of surgery. The ambulance wouldn't make it in time, but Dad had already called the doctor. He decided to have his wife stay at home instead of going with them. Looking at her dying daughter, the mother couldn't stay behind. Her husband couldn't take the girl by himself. She needed her mom. A series of terrible events ended in tragedy, leading to a devastating accident. Shortly after, the lady received an unexpected call, learning that her daughter had been found. But there was no joy in her voice. There was nothing they could do. A sudden landslide had killed the driver instantly, and the ambulance arrived too late. Both the mother and the child were gone. As soon as the lady learned of her child's death, she declared it was a lie, that it wasn't her daughter. She insisted her daughter wasn't married and had no children. She had been looking for her for 6 years and didn't want to lose her like this. Only one little girl survived. Her appendix had ruptured, and she needed surgery. Her condition was critical. Months later, the girl cheated death, and on the day of her discharge, she met her grandmother for the first time. Eleanor Sinclair, that was the name of Lucia's grandmother, the person she was supposed to live with. But as it turned out, the old lady was not happy that the girl had survived. In Eleanor's eyes, this child would always be a murderer, the one who had killed her own daughter. If she hadn't been sick that day, they would still be alive. Her family died because of her. She was a disgrace. The accusations for what happened hit Lucia like a tsunami. They said it would have been better if she had died. Just as she was about to break down, barely suppressing the endless accusations in her mind, she saw Noah, that shining light. That's how he found her, the girl in a terrible state, her eyes full of tears, on the verge of completely losing control. Seeing the lady crying, Noah began to worry. But Lucia reassured him it was just allergies, blaming the win for getting sand in her eyes. For the past 6 months, her life had been a roller coaster. Although she desperately tried to make excuses for her weakness, Noah told her she didn't have to, at least not in front of him. But if Lucia didn't want to talk about it, he wouldn't ask again. Just then, the poor girl's hot tears fell onto his hand, and Lucia clung tightly to the knight's chest. The sky seemed to sense her pain as rain poured down, and Noah held her even tighter. He didn't know what had happened or why the lady was crying so heartbrokenly. But even in the darkness, he was ready to dispel it, to stop it all, whatever it was. Clare prayed that Aunt Beatrice had been well these past few months, hoping that spring had arrived by the time she read this letter. She imagined her aunt reading it in the garden, surrounded by her beloved red roses. She couldn't wait for the weather to get warmer. Just like her mother, the cold severely affected her health. Mother missed Beatrice very much and hoped to see her this summer. Recently, Clare had noticed that her aunt rarely sent letters. She hoped her aunt wasn't sick. Perhaps she was pregnant again, and God would surely bless her with a daughter this time. Clare wondered how the boys and Uncle Edmund were doing, and if Henry was back from the academy. She tried to find out what was new in the capital, but it seemed dead quiet there. Her heart longed for something new, something she couldn't even quite describe. The girl couldn't explain it. She just sometimes felt that she was destined for great things. She often found herself daydreaming or lost in those books that made her heart race. You know, about princesses and princes, balls, banquets, and the kind of adventure her soul craved. So Clare couldn't help but feel that destiny was calling her, or maybe she was just reading too much. She really wanted to see them all and promised to visit once her mother was feeling better. She sent the letter with all her love. The plot of the novel was getting closer. Clare had been very patient during this time. Right now, Clare was living in the remote countryside with her sick mother. Her mother wouldn't live much longer, and after that, she would move in with her aunt. Clare sent a letter every 3 months. All she had to do was make sure no one else read them. Since she was already here, no one would look for her anyway. Everything was going according to plan. The one thing the girl couldn't figure out was what had happened back then. Arthur hadn't recognized Clare. They had met as children, but the next time they met, he was supposed to fall in love. The lady felt it was because she had intruded on the story. Anyway, this was supposed to happen at Lucia's royal engagement ceremony. Clare was lost in thought, trying to figure out why this girl looked so much like her. She knew that was who she was meant to be, but this girl looked exactly like Lucy, which was completely unexpected. Clare almost thought she was here too. Was this a joke? Why would she appear in Clare's book? Lucy couldn't be here. That would change everything. Clare wouldn't allow that to happen. This was her book, her world. Everything was hers. What a surprise to see my dear cousin visiting at this ungodly hour. It turned out that father and mother had left with the boys, so he thought they could have breakfast together. It was time for Clare to take control. She had a place she wanted to go today. This morning started with a search for that little rascal. Skip class again. It was all because of Prince Leo. The maid didn't think he should be in Lady Lucia's room. The moment the maid burst into the room, the prince hid by Lady Lucia's bed. He asked the young lady for a favor, wanting her to keep his secret. The next morning, Lucia kept replaying what had happened last night in her mind. Cuddled in the knight's arms, she felt like a little girl again, safe behind a thick wall. Suddenly, she realized something, staring at the man as if she saw the truth in his eyes. And Noah, looking into her deep eyes, couldn't look away in that moment. Sparks flew. Lucia turned her head in embarrassment, covering her eyes. It was so awkward, and even though anyone could have seen them, she let Noah hold her tight, burying her face in his chest. Now she felt like a complete fool. She couldn't believe she had done that. It was so embarrassing, but Noah's tight embrace did make her feel better. Honestly, Lucy didn't know how she was going to face him after this. It was just too much to handle. Just as she was wondering how she would ever look him in the eye, she ran into Prince Leo in the hallway. Lucia didn't expect him, but he grabbed her hand without a word and confidently pulled her somewhere. She could barely keep up, trotting along. The whole thing was super weird. Just then, a door opened and a maid walked in, thinking he shouldn't be there. Quick as lightning, Sir Leo pulled the girl behind him and hid behind the bed. He told her to be quiet, promising to apologize later, but they absolutely could not get caught now. Since no one was around, the maid thought she could relieve some pressure. She had been holding in for a long time, but now she needed to hold on a little longer. Leo and Lucy were in a very awkward situation, and she even had to cover his mouth to keep him quiet. It seems the maid should eat less beans on toast in the morning. Leo was about to get up, but Lucy noticed the maid was still in the hallway. The second prince, thinking she had left, started talking loudly. First, they had to deal with the aftermath. Talk about a plot twist. Leonardo didn't realize Maria needed such a thorough release, but Lucy was a bit surprised by Maria's actions. She thought they should wait a little longer, as the maid was still lingering in the hallway. It seemed the young lady was about to leave. Her carriage was waiting in the main courtyard. In that case, Leo told her to hold on tight. When he said that, the girl never expected him to grab her and jump with her from the balcony. It was much faster than walking, and the landing was perfect. Of course, the noise caught Maria's attention, so she demanded the young man return home immediately. But Sir Leo didn't go back at all. He left the palace with Lucia. This dreamscape was beautiful. The entire field was filled with flowers that looked like sunshine. Leonardo had to admit, this view was much better than the boring old books he was supposed to be reading. Lucia shone with happiness beside him, like a blooming flower. She was so genuine and pure, so charming. Seeing her so happy, Noah felt a strange feeling inside, as if he were happy too. The journey was quick, and soon they arrived in the kingdom. Thanks to Lady Lucia, Sir Leo easily escaped that trouble. Now that they were in this lovely little town, he wouldn't miss the chance to ask her to spend the day with him. Meanwhile, Theodore's condition took a turn for the worse. His body ached, and he felt terrible. Hearing a knock on the door, he quickly tied his robe so no one would see him in this state. The servant who entered said the carriage was ready. His brothers were waiting, and the lady had already left with the second prince and the knight. In that case, Theodore decided to dress himself and dismissed the servant. He just couldn't figure out what that girl was up to and why the crown prince had requested to have breakfast alone with her. Obviously, if he had known, he would never have let it happen. The question was, did what Alexander told him yesterday mean she was innocent? Alexander wouldn't lie. Anyway, having her around was actually beneficial for Theo. If Father and Alexander found out where the real Lucia was, they would bring her back. Theodore didn't want that. This Lucia was much easier to deal with. But of all people, why was she with the second prince? It made one wonder if he really didn't know who she was. Alexander was very happy to see his brother and hugged him, but Theodore immediately clutched his stomach in pain. His older brother started to worry he was injured, but Theodore just wanted to get home as soon as possible. Just then, he suddenly came face to face with a young woman who called out his name as soon as she saw him. At first glance, the guy seemed to have never seen this lady before, so he thought he should find out who she was. The guy standing next to her had done something terrible to Theodore. Seeing him here, Theo was too surprised to speak. Leonardo suggested Lucy spend the day with him, thinking she hadn't been to the capital in a long time. He noticed that the moment she stepped through the city gates, she was completely stunned. The truth was, Lucia had never been here before. This was the capital. The village she used to go to wasn't even 1% of its size. To be honest, Leo himself hadn't been here in a while. He didn't often manage to escape Maria's clutches to come out and play. Speaking of breaks, Lucy realized that Noah hadn't taken a single day off since becoming her knight. Besides, she didn't really want to go back to the estate right now, especially after that incident with Theodore. Now the second prince was waiting for her answer. Was she ready to have some fun with him today? Leo was being very considerate and charming. He even promised to protect her always. Noah thought Lucia would never agree, but his jaw dropped in surprise when he heard her say yes. She let the second prince go first, and he said he would go find some breakfast. Noah was very curious why this guy was so fascinated with her. She was his brother's fiancé, yet he was being so attentive. The knight wanted to stay and watch them, but her order for him to rest hit him hard. When Lucia suddenly asked how long he had been her knight, Noah thought she was going to fire him. Horrible thoughts flooded his mind. Was it because of yesterday that she now utterly despised him? It turned out the lady was giving him some time off. Noah had been an excellent knight to her. He had always been gentle with her, and she felt she hadn't repaid him enough. Realizing she had never given him a day off, she was sure he must have things he wanted to do. That was utter nonsense. The lady had always been very good to him. In any case, Noah was her knight, and he had to stay by her side. That was his job. He didn't need a vacation. But the thing was, to Lucia, the loyal Sir Noah was more than just a knight. He was her dear friend, and she wanted to be his friend too. Leo was already back. He had found breakfast and was waiting for the lady. So Lucia said goodbye to her knight, her dear friend, saying she would see him later. Her words hit him hard, as if branding him as a knight. His throat tightened, and he could barely breathe. He was just a knight, and he didn't know when he had started to long for more. The red-eyed guy recognized Sir Alexander Avrius and said it was an honor to meet him. His name was Henry Leclerc, son of Marquis Edmund. He and Alexander had attended the same academy. That was his cousin, Clare. They were about to take a walk in the estate garden. Suddenly, Henry asked if he could introduce his sister to an old classmate, or rather, a former classmate, Theodore Aurelius. The girl said it was a pleasure to meet a true genius, but the guy ran off without a word, saying his brother wasn't feeling well. Alexander invited them for tea sometime for a proper introduction. His Highness Prince Arthur was still bothered by what had just happened. The girl who stirred up all sorts of complex feelings in him remained on his mind, filling him with questions. The last time they met, Lucia had fallen asleep in his arms. Arthur had been very careful to cover her with a blanket, but she just kept crying, which made him desperate for answers. She sobbed in her sleep, begging her mom not to leave her. It was then that Arthur felt an urge to get closer, which he couldn't resist. He kissed her forehead. He was driven by a force he couldn't explain at the time, but now he couldn't figure out why he had done that. He didn't understand what was wrong with him, as it was not like him at all, but it was more likely that she was the one who was acting strangely, as if she were a different person. The way Lucia acted, spoke, and even smelled had all changed. Arthur wondered if this had been her plan all along, to get back at him for ignoring her all these years. Or maybe she really wanted nothing to do with him. Just like that, she couldn't possibly be in love with someone else. No way. The Crown Prince had never seen her cry before. She looked so incredibly lovely. He was about to lose control. It was time for his medicine. That herbal bath must have worked. I feel much better. Just take these, and I could go back to dreamland. The butler said he would tell the uninvited guests that His Highness was not receiving anyone at the moment. What a shame. It sounded like the lady really hoped to see him. It turned out the lady had left this morning. The butler felt that even if she hadn't, the prince's condition was not suitable for seeing her. It was Lady Clare Asteria. Arthur had never heard that name. This gorgeous garden was the perfect place for a first meeting. The weather was wonderful. Soon Clare would meet the Crown Prince, and she had already met that little hothead, Theo. He behaved exactly as he did in the book. Soon he would be head over heels, and Clare would have him wrapped around her little finger. Alexander was very polite and even more handsome than Clare had imagined, and taller. What a shame he would be dead soon. After that misunderstanding, Alexander demanded an explanation from his brother. Just like yesterday, but Theodore was in no state to talk right now. He felt very unwell and needed to lie down immediately. Alexander wasn't about to let him slip away like that. You can't just walk away when someone is talking to you. He had had enough of his brother's nonsense. He was no longer a child. From now on, Theodore had to follow the rules, even those he thought were meaningless. He was a duke's son, and he needed to act like one. The Marquis's son and niece dropped by. The lady insisted on seeing Arthur, saying they knew each other as children. She was sorry she couldn't say hello at the banquet. It sounded like she had just arrived in town. Arthur didn't know any Clare, but if she was the Marquis's niece, he bet they would meet again. So Lady Lucia had already left, had she? This upset the Crown Prince, who wanted to know when it had happened. As Rupert said, Lady Lucia left this morning with the second prince. Maria was also furious about it. The butler was surprised you didn't hear her screaming when those two were jumping out the window. The young lady was in luck today. After all, it was the festival. Since they were staying, they were about to go for a stroll. Leo was sure Lucia knew about the festival, since she had been living here, but she claimed she had forgotten. To him, it was obvious she knew. Every year on the first day of summer, people gathered to celebrate the harvest season. It was crowded today, but the real party wouldn't start until after sunset. For now, the second prince invited her to dance. Since she couldn't dance, he told her to wait here while he went to get some drinks. Lucia thought it was no big deal. She still had to talk to Theodore when she got back, so there was no need to rush. She thought she should just run away now, find a decent gentleman, and marry him right away. He was right beside her, no need to look far. If she asked him to take her far away, he was so gentle that he would probably agree without hesitation, provided he wasn't married. Lucia had never asked, but now she was starting to wonder. Not that it bothered her. It was really none of her business. He was just her friend and knight. Anyway, she didn't really know anything about him. Honestly, she didn't know anything about this place either. It was crazy to think that this was once a world in a book. These people didn't seem to recognize her or Leo, so for this little while at least, Lucy could be herself. It was amazing that Cena could come up with all this. Suddenly, Lucy saw a little girl in front of her, holding some flowers. She was touched that it was a gift for her. She knew exactly what to do with these flowers. Meanwhile, Leonardo went into the nearest cafe and bought a takeout orange juice. The guy sitting next to him noticed he was in a good mood. If you didn't know him, you'd think he was having a great time. To be honest, Leonardo was always fun. It was his style. You have to have some fun sometimes. When the second prince returned, he found the lady surrounded by local children. They were getting along so well, and his heart swelled. Now he was beginning to understand why his brother had changed his mind. Fate had presented the crown prince with a choice that would change everything in his life. For the rest of the time, Lucia and Leonardo had a wonderful time. He even helped her pick out a new dress. Even the old folks smiled as they walked by, remembering when they were young and in love. This was the first day since Lucia came to this world that she wasn't stressed about problems. It was a crazy day. They showed up in the middle of the festival and ended up dancing under the moonlight. After the festival, they went to a tavern that served strawberry beer for one day only. Lucia thought one beer would be fine, and besides, she could barely taste the alcohol. I guess Leonardo should have known that a woman drinking would never end well. The lady got drunk quickly and could barely stand, so the second prince started to sweat. He went to support her, but under the influence of alcohol, Lucia gave in to her emotions. She was relaxed and gentle, like a child playing with words, and her movements revealed her vulnerability. Since she was having fun, she suggested they go get more strawberry beer. But Leo didn't think that was a good idea. The girl had caught him off guard, which wasn't good, but it was his job. He didn't sense any danger and left the girl for a moment to get her some water. Suddenly, Lucia heard a voice. Standing before her were three real scumbags. They were the same guys she had encountered the other night, the ones who had harassed her. It seemed the young lady had had a bit too much to drink, so the guy wanted to see what she would do without her watchdog around. After saying those words, the scumbag got a shoe to the face, which shut him up immediately. Lucia got her revenge on that scum, because only one person could call her that. The enraged guy had just taken a step when another shoe hit his face, completely destroying his pride. The girl had no idea who he was, so she told him to introduce himself. In the end, the guys thought she was crazy and ran away, like frightened puppies. Just then, Leonardo came out of the shop, and a terrified guy suddenly ran past him. It turned out the young lady had handled it even better than Leo expected. He thought he would have to save her. Before he could finish his sentence, Lucia suddenly threw herself into his arms, holding him tightly for safety. The girl couldn't hold it in anymore and burst into tears on his shoulder. The second prince thought something was wrong, but the truth was Lucy was just so happy today. She didn't have to lie, worry about getting caught, or be wary of everyone. She was genuinely happy from the bottom of her heart. The girl didn't want to lie. She was telling the truth, and they just gave her a bunch of stuff to calm her down. Leo was frustrated, not understanding how they could do this to his lady. Lucy wasn't crazy, she swore, but if she told them everything, things would get very bad. She just wanted to go home. The second prince took her words as a simple request, and in that case, he decided to take her home. However, he could only guess what place she was talking about. When Lucia said to take her to her real home, Sir Alexander was stunned to see Lucia returning late at night. He saw with his own eyes that not only did the girl return so late, but she also came home in the carriage of the second in line to the throne. Surprisingly, Leonardo took responsibility, saying he shouldn't have let the lady drink so much. Alex couldn't avoid his stepsister's drunken ramblings. A drunk Lucy began to praise her dear brother. Just as she was introducing her wonderful and considerate brother to Leo, Theodore walked into the room. He felt they were trying to wake up the entire estate, and Lucia immediately sensed her stingy brother's arrival. Even so, in her current state, she thoughtlessly grabbed his face and pinched his cheeks, something she had never done before. Theodore was such a sweet person that she decided to ignore his flaws and stinginess. He would be much more likable if he didn't always threaten to, get rid of her. Learning that Theodore had threatened his sister, Alexander was furious and demanded to know what the hell was wrong with him. He didn't want to be disappointed in his younger brother again, but Lucia told him not to scold him out loud, as in her opinion, the brother had good reason for what he did, and she was sure Alexander would have made the same choice in his place. After all, she wasn't the real Lucia. Upon hearing these words, Theodore immediately covered his sister's mouth and took her back to her room, saying that she was completely drunk and confused. As it turned out, he just couldn't handle her, and it was too much of a shock for him. The boy just needed a moment to catch his breath and calm down, as with a wound like that, even breathing became incredibly difficult. His heart was already broken to pieces. He remembered that he was the son of a duke and had to play that role well, had to be the genius everyone said he was, and couldn't be a disappointment like others said, as if he were flawed. Everyone was waiting for the duke's son to grow up quickly. It was all a mistake. He should never have been born, and because of his title, he was destined for eternal judgment and suffering. And at this moment, he received comfort from his unfavored stepsister. As it turned out, his traumatized inner world needed more support than anyone had anticipated. Seeing his painful tears, Lucia couldn't help but want to cry too. But it was okay. She said Theodore was actually a good kid, and then she drowsily fell asleep. Lucia found herself in a strawberry paradise, surrounded by delicious red strawberries. When she finally woke up, she was lying on the floor with a splitting headache. It was then that she realized she had gotten wasted, and with the second prince no less. In the morning, a maid came in to report that the second prince was waiting for her in the garden for breakfast. This was bad, really bad. Lucia had no idea what to say after making such a ridiculous scene. Suddenly, a question occurred to her. Did she mess anything up last night? Did she reveal any secrets? When they met, Leonardo approached her, pinned her against the fence, and said, "Good morning." He had thought she wouldn't show up, but Lucia was just fixated on why he was so close. This guy was worried he'd have to eat alone, which he clearly didn't like. Lucia apologized for keeping him waiting, but Leo said she absolutely didn't need to apologize to him. He was just happy to see her. In fact, he was starting to think Lucy was avoiding him. Seeing that look in his eyes, she could only play dumb, saying she didn't know what he was talking about. She desperately tried to get away from the prince, but ended up sitting right on the railing and almost flipping over. Ouch, that must have hurt. Lucia fell flat on her, but Leonardo rushed over in an instant to check if she had broken any bones. She tried to explain gracefully that she'd hit her behind and might have scraped a little. He had been holding back his laughter, but when Lucia gave him the signal that he could laugh, he finally burst out laughing. He still couldn't believe she had just fallen like that. The second prince apologized for mocking her, but he just couldn't help but tease her. Well, she was happy for him, but His Highness should know that Lucia had no intention of changing herself. Yesterday, she was pestering him to call her by her name, and now her tone was as stiff as one of his professors. The young lady hoped she hadn't been too forward, saying it was just a nickname she was used to. However, it seems Leonardo had been rude to her, so I guess he's the only one who can call her that. The second prince liked calling her Lucy. It sounded sweet. Hopefully, Miss Aurelius hadn't messed anything else up, which depended on her definition of messing up. Actually, Lucy had tried to kiss Leo, but failed. He just thought she wanted to at the time. At the end of their meeting, the young lady thanked the prince, saying it must have been tough to carry her back, as she heard he had. Leo didn't think it was a big deal, but she had hit him pretty hard. It even left a mark. Still, he didn't complain. Miss Aurelius had really changed. He never thought he'd see her like she was yesterday. Leonardo guessed his brother was the first to notice this change. You could tell by how he was delaying the annulment of their engagement. Maybe he had changed his mind. Lucia was convinced she was not a good match for the crown prince, though she had made it clear she wasn't what he needed. Leo was glad she hadn't changed her mind. He enjoyed his time with the young lady. If she became his sister-in-law, he doubted they could get along as pleasantly as they did now. The crown prince doesn't like to share what's his, and neither does Leonardo. For that matter, Lucy could assure Sir Leo that she had never belonged to his brother and never would. Even if she married him, nothing would change. Besides, she was sure they wouldn't stop being friends. Hearing this, the gentleman suddenly stopped, an intent look on his face. Based on what she just said, he wondered if they were really friends. Lucy had been quite sure of it, and the prince agreed that they were friends. He decided to skip the carriage, as such fine weather was perfect for a horse ride. All right, it was time to go their separate ways. Leo wanted to kiss the young lady's hand as a farewell, but Lucia asked him to skip the formalities, since it was just the two of them. Despite being just friends, Leonardo leaned in and gave her a light peck on the cheek anyway. It wasn't what she meant, but whatever, they were friends and would see each other again soon. So Lucy, now that the second prince knew her name, he was still wondering why she was pretending to be Miss Aurelius. But what Leonardo really wanted to know was how she could be of help to him. Lucia really couldn't figure out why. In her memory, this guy was a cold and ruthless general. She couldn't understand how someone so carefree and playful could be that kind of person. Anyway, he had just scared her. She almost thought she had let something slip. The heroine felt it was rare for her and Lucia to reach a consensus. Now Lucy was just a nickname for Lucia. But things could have gotten very bad. She still couldn't believe she had gotten that drunk. Honestly, the plot of the book didn't matter anymore. At least someone would find out Lucy was an imposter, and everyone would know she was pretending to be the one destined to marry the future king. Just like Theodore said, but he was really sad yesterday, so Lucy decided to talk to him in the morning. After the second prince rode off, Linda prepared to bring breakfast to Sir Theodore. He was unwell yesterday and stayed in his room, so she was worried about the young master's health. He's still a child and has always been a picky eater, but it seemed to have gotten worse recently. After hearing this, Lucy took the tray from the servant and told her to go rest. Since she was going to see Theodore anyway, she decided to handle it herself. Standing outside young Master Aurelius's door, the girl took a few deep breaths, gathered her courage, and asked if she could come in, saying she had something to talk about. Without waiting for an answer, Lucia walked in, but the room was empty and very quiet. She placed the tray on the table and continued to look around the room, calling for the young master. Just then, the girl noticed his scarred body. Theodore was hiding, his body covered in burns and scrapes. The young man told her to get out, but Lucy declared she would immediately have Linda fetch a doctor. But even at his lowest, the young master demanded she keep it a secret. He didn't need her to remind him who he was. His words were decent enough, and after saying them, Theo's voice faded, he closed his eyes and slowly leaned back on the sofa. Lucia had no choice but to calm down and move him to the bed. Judging by his breathing and complexion, his ribs were likely bruised, but not broken, and there was probably no internal bleeding, which was a great relief to Lucy. Blue eyes, golden hair, he looked to be about her age. It was all very strange. The girl couldn't figure out who would dare to lay a hand on the Grand Duke's son, and why he was keeping a secret, and why he was keeping Lucy's secret. It seemed he had known about it for a long time. So the question was, why hadn't Theo said anything? Why did he protect his sister yesterday? Strange, this place gave Lucy an odd feeling. She needed to find her way back as soon as possible before it was too late. Noah was ready to guard her sweet dreams forever, just as he watched over her and smelled her scent. Being near this girl, it seemed he no longer needed anything else. In a distant, dark tower, a fearsome dragon held a princess captive. Many had tried, but no one had ever been able to defeat the ancient beast. But when the noble prince appeared, ready to save the world from the evil dragon, all worries vanished. The child thought it was fake. He was always forced to play the evil dragon, and next time his sister had to let him be the princess. According to our gentleman, not all dragons are evil, and he was their uncle, so of course, he knew everything. Their game of evil dragons was interrupted when a white-haired man on a horse appeared near the house. Big Brother was finally back. It was a happy family reunion, and the children were thrilled to see him. They had missed Noah very much while he was away. Since Big Brother was back today, their uncle allowed the children to stay up late. They were going to play games and read books all night. The little ones wanted to bake pies, climb trees, and build a pillow fort, but they were exhausted as soon as it got dark. They fell asleep faster than Noah had expected, though it wasn't surprising after a full day of playing outside. The uncle had Noah carry Lucas while he took the little rascals to bed. These kids were growing up so fast. Noah hoped little Lucas wouldn't forget his big brother by the next time they met. Time flies. The uncle still remembered what Noah was like at their age. He was only 5 or 6 when they found him. The boy had grown up a lot, and the uncle hoped he had found what he was looking for. The boy had checked numerous orphanages, but found nothing. No one remembered a white-haired orphan living there 20 years ago. Noah thought his hair color would make him recognizable, but he was wrong. He did, however, remember wearing an earring as a child. He wondered if there was anything else, a book or a necklace, anything that could help him figure out his identity. When the man found the boy, he only remembered his name and had nothing on him. Noah still had this strange dream sometimes, but he wasn't sure how much of it was a real memory. The dream was blurry, but he saw a beautiful place, destroyed by a great fire. He also saw a woman holding him, who looked like his mother. You'd think it was just his imagination playing tricks on him, playing cruel tricks, Noah felt awkward asking his uncle about these things, as the uncle had raised him and the children as his own. He didn't want to seem ungrateful. He just felt like a part of his life was missing. The uncle understood, of course. Noah needed a rest too. He'd had a long journey. As soon as he fell asleep, he had that strange dream again. A great fire and a poor child he had to save. Hurry, that child must live. He is our only hope. Noah was his mother's cherished child, and she would always watch over him. She loved him very much. Noah woke up feeling frustrated. He'd had that dream again. Somehow, those little rascals had climbed into his bed while he was sleeping. Before they woke up, Noah decided to slip away quietly. He finally saw his lady. She was right there. How the young man had missed her when they first met. He never thought Lucy could be such a distraction for him. Suddenly, Noah realized his lady wasn't breathing. He swept her into his arms and began to call out loudly, trying to wake her. In that moment, he imagined how gently and passionately he could kiss her. When they first met, it was the most romantic and passionate kiss in the world. Almost instantly, Noah was jolted from his thoughts, not even realizing what he had been thinking. Thinking he was going crazy, the young man accidentally flipped over the railing and fell into the water. Hearing the splash, Lucia's eyes shot open, not understanding what had just happened. Looking around, she only saw a wide-eyed frog. How strange for such a little frog to make such a big splash. It must be quite heavy. Suddenly, Sir Noah emerged from the pond, completely soaked. So it was him. She hadn't expected to see him here, and looking at someone so cute, she could barely hold back her laughter. Lucia laughed about it for a good while. Her laughter was so lovely. She was curious why such a noble knight would suddenly decide to go for a swim and even make a friend. Noah was happy to amuse her, and even if he caught a cold, hearing her laugh would be worth it. But Lucy wouldn't let that happen, because she needed her knight. Finally, she could return his cloak, the one he had given her when they first met. Recalling the day of their first encounter, the knight decided to tell her something. In fact, that wasn't the first time they had met. Noah had seen the girl before that night. A few weeks before they officially met in town, she had nearly drowned. He had saved her from a lake in the middle of the forest where no one should have been swimming. The boy heard a splash, and it was as if Lucy had appeared out of thin air. She was unconscious at the time, wearing a strange outfit. Noah watched over her while she was unconscious. He was waiting for Lucy to wake up so he could take her home, but he had no idea who she was or where she lived. Alright, next is a part from our night that Lucy might find super creepy, but he had to tell her. The truth is, when he pulled her up, she wasn't breathing, and he was about to try and revive her. But she woke up first. The day Lucy came to this world, it was Noah who saved her, which means he can take her back. Noah was an upright man, her noble knight, the one her lips seemed drawn to of their own accord. Lucia was now completely sure. She was filled with gratitude for him, and the day he saved her was pure luck for her. When Lucia kissed him, his breath caught, as if the whole world had frozen. Her gentle smile alone made the knight's heart race, and he couldn't believe she had actually kissed him. It was a magical moment, like a spring uncoiling. The world faded away, leaving behind a timeless, budding love. In that moment, excitement and tenderness merged into one, leaving a shiver in its wake, and Noah felt he was about to fall. Looking at these pretty wildflowers, he felt it was a bit silly to give them to her. Noah thought she wouldn't like them. They were just weeds, common wildflowers. But then again, he couldn't give her any expensive flowers. It wouldn't be appropriate. A humble knight shouldn't do such a thing. It was shocking that she could make such a move. This was bad. Noah might start wanting more, so he didn't know how to handle it. As Lucia was getting dressed, she tied a scarf on her head and suddenly noticed a flower on it. It was clearly put there by Noah. That guy was always so good to her, and she wanted to do something in return. Knowing he would be hungry, Lucy made fresh vegetable toast with her own hands, and tomatoes and eggs. She decided to make this, hoping he would like it. But somehow, making a simple sandwich used so many dishes. To put the food on a pretty plate, the young lady spotted some decorative plates on a high shelf. Perfect. Lucy just needed to reach a little further, so she stood on her tiptoes. It looked like she was stretching even more for the plate, with both feet on a tall, wobbly stool. Suddenly, a leg of the stool wobbled, the stool tilted, and she felt herself falling fast. Just when it seemed hopeless, Noah mysteriously appeared, and she fell right into his arms. His mind was filled with worry, extremely worried about whether his lady was hurt. In that moment, Lucia looked at her savior, lost in his eyes, as if struck by a wave of light and heat. Noah's heart was pounding, each beat shaking his soul. He had never believed in love at first sight until it caught him completely off guard. He had caught her securely, so she thanked him sincerely. But the fire in the young man's heart was already blazing. He gazed into his lady's eyes with a special tenderness. Now, more than ever, he wished his lady would be more careful, because this was too dangerous. Just then, Leonardo momentarily dropped his cheerful facade, revealing a cold side, as if a dark secret loomed over him. After a clean kill and a successfully completed mission, he wiped his blade with clear satisfaction. The first crown prince noticed his presence. Hearing the voice, Leo immediately hid his dagger. It was his dear brother, His Majesty, the future king himself. Arthur had heard that Leo didn't return to the estate last night, so he wanted to know where he had been all night. The Crimson Lion was flattered that his brother was worried about him, though he suspected his brother was actually worried about someone else. He was curious when His Majesty had started caring about his actions. The Crown Prince just wanted Prince Leonardo to answer him honestly. Was he just with Lady Lucia? A look of disappointment crossed Leo's eyes. The future king worrying about some woman. How foolish. Hearing this, His Majesty Arthur told his brother to watch his mouth. She was his fiancé and the future queen. And to Leo, she would never be just some woman. But the Crimson Lion just sneered in response. He felt that was debatable. The Crown Prince angrily grabbed his brother's collar and gave him one last warning. But Leonardo knew something else. Lucia was no longer Arthur's bride. Or was she? After saying this, the second prince saw the most wonderful expression on his face. Seeing his brother like this was hilarious. In that case, congratulations to the future king, because no one likes a political marriage. Come to think of it, Big Brother was quite lucky. If Leo remembered correctly, he didn't even like Miss Aurelius before, but it seems things have changed now. Noah was still holding the young lady in his arms, and Lucia was already wondering when he was going to put her down. Just as she asked him to get a plate, as if hearing their conversation, the plate landed right on the knight's forehead. Luckily, Noah wasn't cut, but a big bump formed on his forehead. Lucia was sure he would have a bruise, but the guy clearly felt he deserved it. Feeling guilty, she said she wanted to make him a sandwich on a pretty plate, but ended up smashing the plate on his head instead. Even in this situation, Noah said it was okay. This guy was such a gentleman. He still couldn't believe the young lady had made food for him. The mere thought of it warmed his heart. Lucia was actually a terrible cook, but she sincerely hoped the knight would like what she made. But to Noah, it was perfect. He said seriously that it was the most delicious sandwich he had ever had in his life. The young lady was very happy, genuinely glad that Noah was back. In fact, he felt the same way. He was a rather simple person. He looked cold and serious, but he was nothing like that. He was like an open book. Just as Lucia was writing this, Linda entered the room with good news. It turned out His Highness the Prince had invited her to the palace for dinner tonight. Lucy thought he must be feeling better, which was good. She needed to talk to him too. Honestly, Linda was truly happy for her lady. She said the prince had never sent such an invitation before, and it was even handwritten. They couldn't waste a moment, so the maid immediately went to fetch Miss Julieta. Linda was ecstatic because her lady would soon be married. She really cared about Lucia, but honestly, it was almost a good thing that this was happening. She hoped no one would mess it up this time, and Arthur would finally tell her when the annulment would be announced. His Majesty was under a lot of stress today. Even Rupert could tell something was wrong. Clutching this ring, it was hard to stay calm. Maybe it was just a small incident, nothing more. Today was definitely a pressure cooker. People were on high alert, waiting for His Highness's command. Sir Arthur was sure his instructions were crystal clear. Tell the fleet to turn around and go to the princess. He wanted to go with them, but he had to handle matters here. The prince had already told the ambassadors to cancel the engagement. They were not happy, which was no surprise. But until their prince ascended the throne, Arthur was only responsible to the emperor. Hearing that the prince's coronation was imminent and matters of the Western Kingdom were at hand, Magnus decided to head to the capital. That was the plan. Arthur would see him off, not as the prince-in-waiting, but as the king. Besides, Magnus didn't care at all about any objections the council might raise. Once the crown prince was crowned, there was nothing the council could do. It was time for Arthur Felix to take control of the empire. As captain of the guard, Magnus would never question the crown prince. But as Arthur's friend, he was worried because all the nobles were lying in wait, and their influence was becoming a real problem, and they had the resources to back it up. The captain of the guard was worried about him and the princess. He was sure that with that kind of influence, most nobles wouldn't dare to ignore them. Arthur was aware of the danger ahead, but he was confident no one could stop them. Now he entrusted Magnus with the most important task: bring Evelyn home safely. Miss Aurelius had come to see him, which made Noah's stomach do flips. He didn't understand why she had a dress so stunningly, as beautiful as a real bride. Thinking this, Noah felt like an idiot. He still didn't understand what was wrong with him. Why was he acting like a child? After all, Lucia was still the crown prince's fiancé. That's why he couldn't look at her like that. This guy was still playing with fire. He didn't even notice Lucia approaching and offering him her favorite pastry. Since he was wearing gloves, she offered to feed him herself. In fact, Noah didn't really like sweets, but he didn't want to miss this opportunity. But as soon as he took a bite, he looked like he was about to throw up. Lucy thought his taste was strange, or that the knight didn't like it, so she swallowed the pastry in one bite. She didn't even realize she had eaten the whole thing until it was gone. There was nothing wrong with the pastry. She didn't taste anything strange at all. Just then, all Noah could think about was how she could be so reckless. Yet he was completely captivated. He loved everything she did. He just wanted this woman to be with him and nothing else. Noah longed to be with her, to breathe her scent, to feel her soft skin, to taste her lips. Despite this, he apologized, saying he didn't mean to. Lucia hadn't even realized she had gotten dirty and was surprised by it, having no idea why he had done that. Praying not to say those words, Noah suddenly started a hiccup. He apparently gets hiccups when he's nervous. Now the young lady was absolutely sure that was the reason, but the young man was trying to prove it was just a ridiculous coincidence. The crown prince witnessed their lovely banter, and seeing Lucia's smile, his heart broke. So he appeared behind the young lady without warning and gently kissed her shoulder. Lucia was startled and jumped. She was terrified and almost fell, but luckily Arthur caught her with his strong arms. To hell with the eclipse, the emperor apologized to the girl, saying he didn't mean to scare her. Seeing the crown prince getting handsy with Lady Lucia, Noah was furious and reached for his sword. Lucia didn't keep him waiting long, but she would appreciate it if His Majesty didn't do that again. In that case, Arthur apologized. He was sure she would like it. He had been wanting to be affectionate. At least he apologized, and she was glad to see he was in good condition. Sir Felix couldn't possibly feel unwell. His bride-to-be had just healed him. There was still some time before dinner, so he asked the young lady for the pleasure of having tea with him. He wanted to ask her something. Since this was supposed to be a private matter between them, Arthur asked her to dismiss her guard. He would personally escort Lucia anywhere. The girl figured nothing would happen if Noah waited for a bit. She would be quick this time. Suddenly, the crown prince took over, rudely dismissing the knight. Seeing him send her knight away like that, she thought he was a real jerk. It actually offended her. Arthur didn't even ask for Lucia's consent before starting to escort her to her room for their talk, but he heard a protest from behind him. The crown prince turned, thinking he had misheard, but Noah had indeed said no with confidence. Those words truly angered the crown prince. He really wanted to know who this guy thought he was. He was just a guard, a soldier, a servant, and when His Majesty gives an order, a servant has no right to interfere. So Arthur asked again, who did this boy think he was to dare to disregard him like that? It was actually simpler than it seemed. Noah was his lady's knight, and he only took orders from his lady and his lady alone. This wasn't what Lucia wanted. He would only get himself into trouble. In her desperation, she stood in front of her knight. Noah trusted only her, so Arthur told him to do as His Highness commanded. Lady Lucia was safe in the palace, so she thanked the knight for his concern. A loyal knight would never disobey his lady, and he did as she wished. Lucy didn't like this. She hated seeing him like this, and she didn't like the way Arthur spoke to him. She didn't want to send him away, but she didn't want him to get into trouble either. She hired him to protect herself, but if anything happened to him because of her, she would never forgive herself. Enough people had already suffered because of her, and Miss Aurelius would not allow it to happen again. It was time to end all this, so the first thing she decided to do was to find out why His Majesty had not yet announced the news of their breakup. Arthur promised he would take care of everything, and Miss Aurelius waited patiently. Just as His Majesty was about to reveal something, the fairy-like image of Miss Aurelia flashed before his eyes. Her eyes were like emeralds, her porcelain-white skin sparkled in the sun, and her delicate lips looked as if they were coated with strawberry juice. In Arthur's eyes, she was a true beauty, like a deity, captivating everyone around her. Just looking at her made him so flustered that he had to stand up. He asked her to give him some time. In fact, the crown prince didn't even know why he said that, nor why his heart was beating so hard. The only reason he wanted to ask her about this was for Evelyn and the kingdom. For some reason, Arthur was very nervous, and Lucy could see it at a glance, so she came over to check on him. The crown prince needed to explain things clearly. Ever since he could remember, he had been raised to act for the good of the kingdom, and until now, he hadn't been able to make any decisions. But Lucy was chosen to be the crown princess. As his future wife and queen, as the person he was supposed to spend the rest of his life with, Arthur had not accepted this. The day Lucy came to ask for the annulment of their engagement, he felt free for the first time. He was happy, but he felt he didn't deserve it. He felt guilty because of it, just like what that guy did to his sister. But His Highness wanted to change everything, and he needed Lucy's help. In fact, she was very proud of him for standing up for his sister, but she just didn't know how she could help. Arthur didn't answer her question and just slipped a ring onto her finger. More than anything, he wanted her to stay. He wanted Lucia to stay by his side as his fiancé. That night, she poured her heart out in her diary, saying she felt like she was about to break. Though it sounded crazy, this wasn't her world, and she didn't understand or even remember how she got here. This was the world of Sina's novel, and it turned out that Lucy looked exactly like the villainess Lucia Aurelius, the one who dies at the end. To survive, she had to cut ties with the main characters of the book. Who would have thought she was living with two of them, Alexander and Theodore? But at least she could break off her engagement to Crown Prince Arthur and never see him again. A while ago, Lucy met the Crown Prince, and he accepted her proposal. She had actually succeeded in canceling the engagement. She also met his younger brother, Prince Leonardo. He seemed like a rather interesting person, so the young lady had this idea in her head, and although she remembered him being described as a brutal warrior, she felt it had nothing to do with her anyway. Lucy had another wonderful day and came up with a brilliant plan. She had recently run into this man in town and decided to hire him as her personal bodyguard. Lucy had this knight. His name was Noah. He was burly and strong, but for some reason, he always made her feel at ease. She finally got the invitation to the royal banquet. The plan was moving forward, and the engagement would be canceled in front of everyone. Her second older brother used to hate her very much, but recently Theodore's hostility towards her had eased. Lucy hugged him excitedly. She couldn't even remember the last time she had hugged someone. So this is what it felt like to have a younger brother. Maybe coming here wasn't so bad after all. However, Lucy's plan completely fell through. The Crown Prince did not break off the engagement and wouldn't even explain why. But that wasn't even the worst part. It turned out that Theodore knew she wasn't the real Lucy. There were so many questions about this. She had no idea how he found out, why no one had said anything, or even what he would do to her now. But she could feel her strength draining away. She was just so tired. After that, Lucia met the second prince again, even though he was supposed to be a cold and ruthless general. She couldn't remember why he was actually super nice to her. Her stomach started to hurt badly, and Theodore carried her back to her room to rest. Of course, our young lady hadn't forgotten her loyal knight, the one who healed the bruise on her wrist. Noah was a very dear friend to her. Lucy liked the closeness between them. It was strange. People always treated her so formally, and although she wasn't the real Duke's daughter, she did like it when Noah called her my lady. She didn't want him to hurt Theodore while protecting her. Theo was already injured, and she didn't want Noah to get into trouble. Lucia didn't understand what was happening, but it was clear that this world was much bigger than she had imagined. She had no idea the Crown Prince even had a sister. It seemed Arthur was having trouble with the royal council. Lucy had always thought the Crown Prince was rather independent. Honestly, she felt quite sorry for Arthur. She hadn't been very nice to him, always judging him for things he hadn't even done yet. The heroine needed to be careful around him, but she hated seeing him in pain. Seeing him suffer the same pain as her brought back old memories and tears. But this time, someone was there to wipe her tears away. It was so unexpected. The heroine couldn't believe she had cried in front of Noah. But to be honest, she liked to savor the memory of that hug. Her days here had been quite crazy. Lucy was now even bold enough to call her and Leo friends. While Noah was on leave, she and Leo spent some time together in the city. People didn't seem to recognize nobles at all, so the young lady could be herself for a day. The world Cena created was so amazing. It was a pity she wasn't here. Lucy got a little drunk and almost let things slip. So besides biting the second prince, it turned out she had messed up in many other ways too. That's how they became buddies. Soon Noah was back. Words couldn't describe how much the girl had missed him. After all, she did let him go for 2 days. Now it made sense why he was so happy to see her. It was also Noah who saved Lucy when she first came to this world. It was a pity she couldn't find out sooner, but it turned out he was just too shy to say anything. The perfect knight was worried his lady would get the wrong idea. He was such a genuine person. He looked cold and stern, but he wasn't like that at all. He was warm and gentle. Lucia was happy to have him, and he might be her ticket out of here. Even if she was an outsider here, she wasn't alone. Leo was her friend, and so was Noah. She even had a brother here, even if Theodore hated her guts. Her heart broke when she saw his pain. He was hurt and couldn't even talk about it. She had no right, but God, she wished she could be his real sister. After all this, Lucia had no idea what to do next. Everything she wrote in her diary was suddenly known to others. Miss Aurelius definitely did not expect the crown prince to ask her to remain as his fiancé. The unexpected news shocked her so much that she jumped up as if electrocuted. She pointed out that she had asked His Majesty not to do this multiple times and had already given her answer. But when she washed her hands and tried to take off the ring, she realized it was stuck. It seemed Arthur got a nosebleed from too much stress, and he turned away to apologize. Looking at him, Lucia felt a pang of sympathy and decided to help. She sat him down in a chair and told him to tilt his head back. It was then that His Majesty started kissing her hand. He didn't know the young lady hated him so much. The truth was Lucia didn't hate him. She was just terrified. Arthur wouldn't force her to marry him, but he really needed her right now. He had written to her father, who was planning to return sooner than expected. When the Duke returns, the boy will need his support against the council. After his father's death, the council was in charge of assisting Arthur in running the country. Back then, the nobles of the council had power, like their fancy titles, but they wanted more. The only person who could help them was the new ruler of the Draken Kingdom. After he overthrew the previous ruler and declared himself emperor, he started a war with the neighboring countries. No country could stand against it, and thus the empire was formed. But for some reason, Asyanor was left alone. For the sake of peace, the council suggested they unite. There was no way she was going to marry that hypocritical and incompetent prince. In fact, it wasn't up to Evelyn to decide. According to her brother, she had to do her duty just as he had to do his. His sister was supposed to marry the heir to the Draken Empire, Crown Prince Victor. As the emperor's nephew and sole heir, Victor ruled the lands, but he was not a decent man. He always treated his servants like dirt, making them run errands and constantly putting them down. For Evelyn, marrying him meant walking straight into the clutches of a predator with no escape. Arthur couldn't fight the lords. He was a fool who blindly trusted their advice and sent his sister to that monster. He didn't believe the council was acting in the best interests of Asyanor or the princess. They were on the emperor's side. If they went against him, Asyanor and Draken would be at war sooner or later. But Lucia's father had the power to stand against the council. His duties were independent of the kingdom. The Duke didn't care for politics, so if Arthur was to ask for his help, he needed Lucia on his side. So the crown prince begged her to stay, for his sister and for the future of his people. He asked the girl to stay by his side for a while. The truth is, there were things His Highness didn't know, but Lucy didn't know how to explain. Olden joined them mid-conversation. It looked like he was about to say something. It seems Arthur had made it clear he didn't want to be disturbed today. However, it turned out that Lord Cedric was taken out last night, supposedly while he was on patrol. The Crown Prince jumped up at the news. He didn't want to leave the girl alone, but he needed to find out the truth before he left. He kissed the young lady's hand again and promised he would look forward to her answer. At dinner tonight, Lucia was shocked by the news. She knew very well now that this was war. His Highness the Crown Prince absolutely hated the way Lucia had just looked at him. Hated the way Noah looked at her, hated that he dared to touch her face, and that she allowed him to. But what Arthur hated most was how much it tore him up inside. The truth is, he didn't even know what he wanted yet. It's hard to say how long we'll have to wait to find and get rid of this pest. For the past few years, we've suffered great losses because of those thugs. The mines were destroyed, the gold was stolen, and now they've started taking lives. The bandits not only killed Lord Cedric, but also his personal physician. Although the lords were eager to take action, Arthur said the royal guard was already investigating. The lords thought we should make this public and put a bounty on the culprits. But according to the Crown Prince, the harvest season was approaching, and this was not the time to give people more to worry about. Besides, he assured us that nothing good would come if neighboring countries found out we couldn't handle this. Lord Roderick was sure that things would have been much easier if they had asked the Emperor for help from the beginning. Realizing they thought he couldn't handle some low-level crime, Arthur took it as a personal insult. As your humble servant, Roderick was really worried if the future king truly cared about the kingdom's interests. They'd be thankful if the Emperor didn't declare them enemies when the princess returned, let alone offer help. But Arthur insisted that things were being taken care of. According to his plan, his problem should be out of the port by now. According to a council member, if Crown Prince Ediones was the sole heir, then the princess was to become the empress. As far as Arthur knew, they were still busy finding a legitimate heir. He was a child when it happened, but he was well aware of how much blood was shed for the empire. He also knew about the rumors that the young prince's body was never found. As for the emperor himself, Arthur intended to visit him personally after his coronation. So, he would appreciate it if the council cut all ties with the empire until he said otherwise. They could rest assured for now that the culprit would pay. Noah didn't understand why she was sending him away again, but he was sure there was a reason. Her decision to hire a knight meant something dangerous enough to require one was happening, but for some reason, she kept pushing him away. Rumor has it the prince was having dinner with Miss Lucia tonight, and he ordered the room to be filled with red roses. Strangely, he even sent the butler to find out what dishes and desserts the young lady liked, so they could be made. What was even stranger was the young lady's attitude towards the prince. It seemed she was no longer as infatuated with his highness as she used to be. They said she had grown cold and even asked to cancel the engagement. According to the maids, that was for the best. If she came here, the prince would just continue to ignore the young lady. Now the tables have turned. It seems His Majesty has finally developed feelings for the young lady. It was only a matter of time before she fell in love with him again. The maid thought the young lady was just playing hard to get to win him over. It seems the trick worked. Just then, Noah's mind flashed back to that meeting where the prince asked who he was. He didn't know the answer to that question, but he still dreamed of her, his beautiful mistress. Though he had nothing, he dared to desire the whole world. Noah was only afraid of where this desire would lead. He was afraid this sudden craving for more would be his undoing. Just as the knight decided to disappear, he felt an arrow fly past his cheek, grazing his skin. The archer was skilled and precise, and Noah seemed to find the face very familiar. Leonardo Felix, the Crimson Lion, a cold and ruthless general. Leonardo hoped the guy was okay, saying he missed his shot by a long shot. Noah sized up the archer and saw nothing to worry about. Just as Leo said, he had missed the target completely. The second prince recognized the guy. He was his lady's knight. If His Highness was referring to Miss Aurelius, then yes, Noah was her personal knight. It was a bit strange. If the knight was here, Lucia must be somewhere around with Leo's brother, and she probably ditched her guard. The second prince decided to speak his mind. He needed someone to bounce ideas off of, and since Noah wasn't busy, he asked him to show him what skills the young lady saw in him to make him her personal knight. It was a test of strength, a matter of honor. Sparks flew between them, and they sealed the deal with a handshake. Noah agreed without hesitation. He needed to let off some steam anyway. This was a perfect chance for Leo to see what this mysterious guy was really made of. Lucia was in a terrible state. She still couldn't get the ring off. This seemed completely different from what happened in Cena's story. He was in a rather difficult situation, and His Majesty definitely needed Lucia's support, but she had no idea what would happen if she agreed. If she pretended to be his fiancé, who knew if she would be exposed, or what the Crown Prince's fiancé was even supposed to do. It didn't seem like His Majesty proposed, because he actually wanted to get married. The girl couldn't do it, but refusing him felt just as impossible. After walking for a long time, Lucy wondered where Noah was. She really wanted to see his face. Just as she thought he must be nearby, she suddenly saw something much more appealing. Right there, she saw these amazing, tough-looking soldiers training their hearts out. It seemed this was where the knights trained. A young lady probably shouldn't be here, but she figured she could watch them from a distance when suddenly she heard a voice behind her. The handsome knight who found her was sure the young lady was lost. This was no place for beauty, but he made a point of saying he was glad she came. It seemed the guy didn't recognize her, so Lucy said she was looking for a friend. Now the knight was curious which of his buddies was so lucky, so he called everyone over. He wanted to know which of these guys was lucky enough to be friends with such a sweet young lady. Like a pack of wolves, the men surrounded the girl. None of them had ever seen her, but now they all wanted to be her friend. After calming the beasts, the knight asked what her friend looked like. He was tall, with light-colored hair, sharp features, and an amazing physique. It seemed Lucy's fantasy was coming true. Seeing Noah fight made her heart race. It turned out the knight was strong and fast, but he was holding back. Leo had only seen one other person fight like that. Before you knew it, Leo managed to knock the weapon out of his opponent's hand. He did it just like that. Noah was facing his enemy, completely disarmed. He never thought it would end this way. Cheers erupted nearby. The members of the Knight Order were very happy about the prince's victory. Leonardo didn't even know they had an audience, let alone a special guest. From the corner of his eye, Noah noticed long, wavy hair flowing in the wind. Today's special guest was particularly lovely and charming. Lucia was right to stay and watch the fight. Just then, Noah lifted his shirt to wipe the sweat from his face. What an embarrassing encounter. Leonardo was very happy that someone had come to see the exhibition match. It was his lady, huh? It was quite a surprise. Out of respect, he kissed her hand with all the passion he could muster. But then he saw the ring on her finger and looked up at her, hoping for some kind of explanation. Instead, Lucy hid her hand in a fluster, as if he had seen something he wasn't supposed to. The captain was stunned to learn that His Highness knew the beautiful lady. Apparently, she was looking for a friend and got lost. Leonardo was pretty sure the captain knew her too. After all, she was to be his future queen. The knights bowed before Miss Lucia, the daughter of the great Duke Aurelius, and apologized. The captain and his men were ready to pay for their rudeness, even if it cost them their lives. They didn't recognize the future queen, but Lucia didn't want to press the matter. She told them to stand up. Just then, her eyes fell on her personal knight. Like the others, Noah knelt and bowed his head. He had to pledge his allegiance to his lord. It was more than just a contract. It was the foundation of a knight's life. Lucia paused. She didn't understand why he was kneeling before her too. Without hesitation, she told Noah to get up and the other knights as well. The girl had interrupted their training, so she told them to continue what they were doing. Then she asked Sir Leo to escort her to her carriage, which he gladly did. Everyone saw that His Highness was about to kiss the young lady's hand. The knights thought he had sworn off women until his mission was complete. He had only been seen with his sister and Miss Maria. What a shame, the captain actually liked girls. Just like Miss Aurelius. It was amazing she hadn't changed a bit since they last met. But the captain still didn't recognize her. Magnus watched them until they disappeared over the horizon. He sincerely hoped His Highness knew what he was doing. Everything seemed fine, but for some reason, Lucia felt strange. She was very uncomfortable. She wasn't lying, at least not about that. But now she felt he was upset. He had suddenly become so quiet. Leonardo suddenly spoke up, saying his little brother had picked out a great ring, that it was their mother's favorite. The tension in the air skyrocketed instantly. Miss Lucia froze, and even Noah felt a chill run down his spine. The young lady asked me to inform His Majesty that she will not be staying for dinner tonight, as she is feeling a bit unwell. As he was walking her to the carriage, the second prince suddenly became curious and wanted to confirm his suspicion to see if she had changed her mind. According to Miss Aurelius, she hadn't changed her mind. It's just that things had suddenly become too complicated. Suddenly, she squeezed her eyes shut and covered them with her hand. It seemed she had gotten something in her eye. Leo found this quite cute. He told her not to move and gently blew into her eye. Surprisingly, it worked, and now the prince had a chance to look at Lucia's eyes up close. Noah watched all this with burning hatred, growing more jealous with every second. But what was worse, his gaze fell upon the future king of the empire, who was also witnessing it all. He felt as if he had been shot in the heart with a poisoned arrow, like being stabbed in the back by someone close. Young Master Theodore had been feeling unwell recently, but he was finally starting to get better. The maid was glad he was better, so he asked her to brew some tea and bring it over. He also asked her to fetch Miss Lucia, as he really needed to talk to her about the diary. But it turned out Miss Lucia was not here at the moment. She was actually with the crown prince, who had invited her to dinner. When Theodore learned who she was with, he couldn't believe his ears. The empire in this story was heading for war. It was hard to figure out how things got so messy. Lucia felt sorry for leaving, but she just couldn't give him an answer right now. He looked so depressed. He probably hadn't been sleeping again. He needed her help, but she didn't even know how to help him when she wasn't even real. With these chaotic thoughts, she spotted a strange girl with long white hair whom she had never seen here before. Beatrice's only niece, Clare, appeared in the castle, but Lucia knew at once that it was Sina. The blonde girl suddenly heard someone call her name and turned around, but then rushed into the crowd. Lucia tried to call out to Sina and ordered the carriage to stop immediately. She was in such a hurry that she tripped and fell. Nothing else mattered now, because Lucy was absolutely sure that was Sina. She chased after her so quickly that she didn't look around and didn't even notice the horse right in front of her. When disaster seemed inevitable, Noah suddenly appeared like a gust of wind and swept her into his arms. Unbelievably, the knight had saved his lady. A surprised crowd immediately gathered around them. Despite the sharp pain, Noah thought of the young lady in terror. She was badly hurt, seriously injured. Seeing her head bleeding, the knight freaked out and started yelling. But Lucy said it was just a scratch. Noah, fearing for his lady's life, begged her not to close her eyes and to keep talking. But Lucy could only think about what she had seen. Whispers came from behind the injured girl. In this fatal situation, Noah just pleaded with her to hold on. Judging by her dress, they said she was a noble, so it was strange for her to jump out of the carriage like that. The thing is, Lucia could recognize Sina from a mile away. Linda couldn't even imagine what the young lady was thinking, jumping right in front of a horse. Luckily, the young lady only suffered some scrapes and bruises, so the doctor thought the spooked horse was the worst of it. He said the young lady needed bed rest to recover. Lucia swore she was fine and would never do that again. Sir Noah had taken most of the impact. The doctor said the knight insisted he was fine and didn't need a doctor, and that the young lady should rest. But Lucia needed to see for herself, and she hadn't thanked him yet. Linda thought he was just doing his duty and immediately tried to stop her mistress. She was sure this wasn't something the future queen should be thanking someone for in person. Now, the maid went to see the guests out and get some more pillows for the young lady before she left. Linda didn't forget to mention how beautiful the new ring looked on the young lady's hand before she left. Lucia had completely forgotten about it. She knew what she saw. It was Sina, she was sure. When the door opened, she thought it was Linda returning with the pillows. But it was Theodore who walked in. After leaving her mistress's room, Linda was suddenly stopped by the personal knight's attendant. He was in great pain and barely managed to catch up with the maid to ask about Miss Lucia. Linda said the young lady only hit her head and, thank goodness, she was now resting in her room. Noah was covered in cuts and bruises, but all he cared about was that the young lady was awake. He decided to go see her at once. But Linda said she hoped he wasn't planning to visit her tonight in that state. She thought it was terrible and asked the young man to step aside to talk. When they were alone in the study, the maid asked Sir Noah his age, his rank, and what lands he possessed. The young man was 25, but he had no rank and no lands. From this, Linda concluded that he was an orphan, a commoner with no formal training. And yet he had managed to become the personal knight of the future queen. He must know what a rare opportunity this was for him. Then Linda felt that he didn't realize how inappropriate his behavior towards the young lady was. But Noah didn't understand. He treated Miss Lucia with the utmost respect and would never think of insulting her. Linda caught him staring at her, and she'd bet that after everything that had happened, she knew exactly what was on his mind. The lady was definitely overcompensating for what she missed that night. He might have gotten the wrong idea, so Linda set him straight. Lucia had been deeply in love with the crown prince her whole life, and while the prince might not have felt the same at first, it was obvious now that he was completely smitten with her. And this maid would never let anyone ruin her lady's happiness. Besides, there was no way they would ever let a commoner marry a noble. So the maid told the boy to consider his options and stick to his duty of serving the lady. She was sure he was a smart man, and he had already proven he had the strength to protect the lady. After that, Linda was willing to bet he wouldn't cross the line and would keep his distance. Noah heard every word the maid said and decided to do as she told him. It was his duty. When she ran into Lucia's brother, she happily called out his name, but Theodore had already told her not to act so familiar with him. He didn't say anything else, just told her to follow him at once, that they needed to talk. By the time they reached the study, It was already dark outside, and the whole place felt a bit eerie. It was suspiciously quiet. Lucia decided to say something to break the silence, asking him how he was feeling, but Theo felt she wasn't the one who should be worried about him. He showed his dear sister a notebook and demanded she explain what it was. It was Lucy's diary. She had no idea how he found it, and she said she had already explained everything. In that case, Theodore felt she was either playing dumb, taking him for an idiot, or she really thought he would believe she was from another world. Okay, I know it sounds crazy, but the first time she tried to explain, they had drugged Lucy. She had no reason to lie to him now. Theo had enough on her to have her locked up, or worse. In her position, the only thing a girl could tell the son of a count was the truth. As for whether he believed it, that was up to him. Even Lucy didn't believe herself at first. So what could she expect? It seemed Theo had known she was the real Lucia all along and had kept quiet. He even stopped her when she was drunk and about to spill the beans herself. So she felt he needed something from her. I must have hit my head to be speaking so recklessly to the son of a count. Leonardo wasn't giving this fake lady any favors. As she said, if they found out her true identity, she'd be done for. He was just delaying the inevitable because he felt she was useful for now. That's what Eleanor Sinclair used to tell Lucy when she was a child. Her grandmother always told her to be a useful person. Theo tried to explain that he loathed Lucia and didn't care about this imposter at all. He didn't want the real Lucia back, so he decided to have this girl take her place. She could be a perfect substitute. He would mold her into Lucia Aurelius. It was a miracle she hadn't been found out yet, considering her words and actions were nothing like the originals. The original wouldn't even dream of doing half of these things. Theo was being generous, and Lucia should be grateful under the circumstances. She was grateful, but he didn't speak very kindly. They agreed to start lessons tomorrow. Everything was fine. At least the girl wasn't dead yet. She had seen this before, but her leg was so swollen that she ended up falling to the ground involuntarily. Surprisingly, the cold and heartless Theodore rushed over to help the girl up. He didn't help her out of kindness. He just wanted her to disappear quickly, and she was moving as slow as a snail. He decided to start the lessons in a week, giving the girl a chance to recover. Just as he said, he wasn't doing it for her, he just didn't want her limping around here. Anyway, Lucy was grateful to her brother. That night, the second prince witnessed the upcoming meeting with the future princess. He remembered the day she got something in her eye and thought she had annoyed him. Leonardo couldn't even imagine how she could have annoyed him. Lucy was just a tool, a perfect pawn, just a means to seize the duchy and the crown. That night, Lady Lucy occupied the thoughts of two men. The crown prince couldn't stop thinking about her. Every time he saw her, the scene was deeply imprinted in his memory. But given his position, it was difficult to do anything about it. Damn, he had really set up a sweet little scene here. Leonardo had no idea his brother was such a romantic. He grabbed a bottle of wine and poured himself a glass. Really, he was just admiring the flowers, hoping his brother wouldn't get the wrong idea. Arthur was completely unmoved. It seems I was wrong to think Leo was more secure. The future king told him to go provoke someone else, because Arthur had responsibilities. Theodore was curious what those responsibilities were. Was it to throw another party, or to attend a council meeting? He wanted his brother to give him a hint, otherwise he might just go ask his men, who would have the real answers. The truth was, the crown prince was trying to get his sister back, the one he had traded away to appease the council. But he framed it as being for Oceaner, for the good of the people, teaming up with a corrupt empire that swept over everything. Leo didn't believe it was for the people. Arthur messed up, which was what he was good at, and his constant disappearances were more important to him. Leo even thought his brother was so caught up in his own affairs that he didn't even notice what was happening with Oceaner. She was their sister, and when Arthur sent her away, he deeply regretted it. Now, he was trying to make up for it, to give her the freedom she deserved. But Lucia was different. Arthur was convinced Leonardo knew nothing about her. The second prince, however, didn't think so. He made it clear he knew a lot. A week later, Prince Arthur realized without a doubt that Lucia was special, not at all like Princess Eleonis. You couldn't compare Lucia to Evelyn. Until now, he had been sure he wasn't forcing her, but now he had his doubts and wondered if he was. A visit from the butler brought him to his senses. Lady Lucia's answer today was the same as yesterday and the day before, but there was a reason for it. When Rupert told Prince Arthur that the lady had been hit by a carriage on her way home, he was stunned. Noah's health was still poor. His wounds were still bleeding, and the bruises hadn't faded. He should have been recovering by now, but his strength was fading every day with no signs of improvement. Linda was still bothered by how obvious it was that a man had a crush on a girl. But in her opinion, the young lady was also overly concerned about the knight's health. Normally, Linda wouldn't even have noticed, but since the incident, the young lady's behavior had been abnormal, barely even going to the palace. She also rarely mentioned Prince Arthur, and when the topic turned to him, she always frowned. This made Linda think that maybe, just maybe, she had fallen out of love with him. When Linda returned to the palace, she noticed the staff was in a frenzy. Something crazy had happened. The servants saw His Highness the Crown Prince appear at the estate gate. What a surprise. Linda guessed he was here to see the young lady. It was the first time the maids had seen the lady's fiancé. He had never visited before. Despite the maids' objections, Linda told them to take His Highness to the young lady immediately. To be honest, the maids weren't even sure if the lady was awake, but that didn't matter now. It was another beautiful, sunny morning. It felt like something interesting was about to happen. The sunlight knocked on the young princess's window. Lucia was starting her lessons with Theo today. No doubt, the guy would be a strict teacher. Still, she was glad he was back on his feet. She still couldn't figure out who could have hurt him so badly. And what she had seen then, that was still a mystery too. It might have been real. Lucia was convinced she had just been hallucinating. She had almost been trampled to death by a horse because of it. She hadn't seen Noah at all recently. Linda just wouldn't let her out of her room. The truth was, Lucy missed him. She really wanted to see him and know if he was okay. It was embarrassing that she was even thinking these things. Time to get up. She was already feeling dizzy. As she came out of the bathroom, she heard a voice and thought it was Linda. So she asked her to get her a light dress, as she wanted to go for a walk. When Lucy saw Prince Arthur in her bedroom, she froze. Silence fell between them. Arthur was startled and spilled hot tea all over himself. Good heavens, it was scalding. He immediately apologized to the lady, explaining that he just wanted to see her and didn't realize she was bathing. In any case, the crown prince decided to leave, insisting he hadn't seen anything. Before leaving, he said he was perfectly fine, even though he had just been burned by the tea. But Lucy couldn't just let him go like that. She was worried sick and told him to take those clothes off at once. Arthur was very flustered by this, but the young lady told him not to get any ideas and to just get in the bathroom. She brought the young man a basin of warm water for him to sit in while she went to call a healer. She was sure the burn would get infected if not treated, and if he wouldn't go, she would take care of him herself. Arthur had no choice but to agree. He had only burned his leg, and she was making such a fuss. It was so embarrassing, and he was having a hard time getting out of this predicament. Hearing a creak, he thought Lady Lucia had returned, so he tried to cover himself with a robe. Leonardo entered the house, thinking that if she wasn't in bed, the lady's condition probably wasn't that bad. For a moment, he wanted to let her know he was there, that he just wanted to see her. Suddenly, the second prince heard a noise from the bathroom and hid around the corner to surprise the young lady. As soon as she turned the corner, Leo jumped out and grabbed her, hoping she had missed him. Prince Arthur didn't see it that way. It sounded like he needed to ask Leo what he was doing in Lady Lucia's room. Just then, Lucia walked into the room to tell them the healer would be there soon. Almost at the same time, Linda also walked in, and they both stared at the princess as if they'd seen a ghost. The situation was so chaotic that Arthur panicked and basically threw his brother under the bus. Theo was still racking his brain, trying to figure out what it all meant. A novel character, another world. He felt he had to talk to the professor about this. He must know something. Suddenly, a letter arrived from the Duke. Dad was coming back soon, and the boy had to hurry. According to the maid, Lord Alexander was still inspecting the mills in the south. He wouldn't be back until next week at the earliest. So Theo decided to ask about Lady Lucia's condition, almost calling her sister out of habit. The maid noticed his slip of the tongue, but said the lady had almost fully recovered and was feeling much better. Then Theo ordered her to bring the girl to him. But it turned out the lady was with the prince right now. Theo couldn't believe he had actually visited Lucia. She would be miserable if they got married, which was why she had asked to break off the engagement. What was even more surprising was that both the crown prince and the second prince had shown up. The doctor who arrived can assure you that His Highness is fine. He was just splashed with a little hot water, nothing to worry about. On the other side of the door, the maids and the second prince could barely keep from laughing. It was all so ridiculous. Sir Leonardo really wanted to know what on earth Lucia had done to him. Just like that, he unexpectedly ran into the night. Noah? It had been a while since anyone had seen him. Leo kept wondering where that guy had learned to fight like that. Strangely, he couldn't remember seeing him anywhere. His Majesty almost never forgot a face, and he had personally trained with all the knights in the academy who were around Noah's age. This knight didn't learn to fight at the academy. His uncle taught him. Leo was very interested in meeting this uncle. He had only ever seen one other person fight like that. Except, unlike Noah, that person hadn't let the prince win. Now Leo was dying to know who this guy really was. Just then, the maids came out of the ladies' room. Linda greeted the second prince, saying it was an honor to see him. She noticed he didn't like formalities, but asked him to use the main gate next time. All right, time to move to a more comfortable place. The maids would take care of it. Linda also dismissed the knight, telling him to go back and train with the other guards. Now that her fiancé was here, she didn't need him around. Those words stung him deeply. Noah debated whether to go see her, but in the end, decided to leave her be. Now the crown prince really hoped she was feeling better. She was feeling much better. He was glad to hear it, and he noticed how good the ring looked on her. According to Lucy, the ring was stuck, and she couldn't get it off. She was sorry for leaving the way she did, but she still needed time to think things through. The truth was, His Majesty wasn't here to ask Lucia for an answer. They were engaged as children, but this was his personal request now. Arthur wouldn't force her. He would gladly wait for her answer whenever she was ready. He just wanted to know how she was doing. Your Highness, Lord Theodore burst into the room without knocking. He apologized for the intrusion, saying he needed to talk to his sister. Arthur and his brother were always welcome, so Theo told them to stay as long as they liked. Looking at these two, it was hard to tell if they had always been this close. Even without knowing the answer, Arthur still found it sweet. As Leonardo leisurely drank his tea, they brought him another cup. To be honest, he wasn't a big fan of this one either. It was too strong for him. Linda apologized that they didn't have any tea to his liking. You could tell Leonardo wasn't really here for the tea. He wanted to know when the Duke would be back. Prince Arthur approached, deciding to find out why Prince Leonardo was asking. The second prince was glad to see his brother was doing well and properly dressed. Though he had to say, the woman by his side was truly something else. First, Arthur apologized to Linda for the commotion he and his brother had caused. Even so, according to the maid, everyone was happy to have the royal family here. So Leonardo felt it wouldn't be too forward of him to stay at the estate for a few days. He realized how much he liked the scenery here, and he'd heard the Count's forest was an excellent place for hunting. The second prince had been itching to hunt a stag, though a doe would do just fine. Ignoring his brother, Leonardo was afraid they had to say goodbye. It seemed his guards had been waiting for him. Seeing how many of them were mobilized, something must have happened. Linda explained that they had just arrived. She didn't want to disturb His Highness's time with the lady. So the crown prince decided to leave, and his brother wished him a safe journey. Speaking of which, he quite liked the tea. I wonder, is it strawberry flavored? Theodore wrote down everything he could remember about what happened to Lucia from the time she was brought to this house until she disappeared. He wanted her to learn it by tomorrow. Theo had stayed up all night taking notes, and he felt it was only fair if Lucy put in the same effort. Like he said before, her behavior for the past few months was not like Lucia's at all. Fortunately, considering she was kidnapped and the incident had taken toll on her, no one really noticed. But Lucy couldn't use that as an excuse forever. So to become Lucia Aurelius, she needed to know who she was. Theo decided to start with Lucia's history. Then he would cover the story of the Aurelius family, followed by the history of Oceaner. Of course, the girl also had to work on her etiquette. It wouldn't be hard to memorize all of this. She also needed to master Lucia's skills: archery, horseback riding, calligraphy, poetry, and embroidery. In addition, Lucia was fluent in several languages, which she would also have to learn. This was Theodore's study, and no one was allowed in without permission. All the books and records here were under lock and key. Since Alexander was still away, the young man planned to tell Linda that they would be having dinner with his sister here. Furthermore, he told the girl to avoid the second prince. Prince Leonardo was a handful. In his opinion, nothing good would come of Lucy getting too close to him. In fact, everyone found him unbearable, and it was super weird that he wasn't making an effort to get close to anyone. That definitely wasn't the case when he and Lucy first met. After everything that happened, Sina was sure it was her. Lucy. She shivered at the very thought. She had definitely called her name and chased after her. But the question was, how and why was Lucy here? There was no telling how long she had been here or where the real Lucia even was. If she's here and has already met Arthur, we're done for. But this was still Sina's story. Suddenly, she heard her nephew's voice. Henry put a robe over her. She had really scared him today. She was just startled. Something happened in the town square. Henry had already heard the rumors. In the town square, a horse nearly trampled a young lady. The man pushed her out of the way just in time. The boy wanted to go shopping with Sina and show her around. He could be annoying, always following her around, but he really took care of her. As for Henry, he had been hoping to catch a glimpse of that person. The last time he saw her in the town square was a few months ago. She was his first love, an incredibly beautiful girl. Lucia spent the whole day studying, well into the evening. She couldn't remember the last time she had hit the books so hard. Theodore was training her in etiquette and social graces like a madman. She could have taken a break for lunch, but the jerk wouldn't let her. Finally, the day was over. Now Lucy could see him, but she was super nervous, as if she hadn't seen him in a week. She didn't know what to say, especially showing up so late. If Linda saw her, she would definitely give her an earful. Just then, Noah opened the door, saying again that he didn't need to see a doctor. Lucy broke into a smile. Her heart swelled, and she felt a warmth spread through her. He immediately apologized, saying he would have dressed more presentably if he had known it was her. She didn't care about that. She was more worried about his bruised face. But the moment she touched his face, Noah flinched, pulled away, and lowered his head. Linda said he was fine, but he was so pale. Lucia was worried it was all her fault. Noah just brushed it off without even looking up, saying it was just part of the job. She didn't understand what was happening, but she had no choice but to take his word for it. Suddenly, he became very formal, asking if she needed anything else. The truth was, Lucy just wanted to see him. She felt it had been a while and wanted to say hello. But it was getting late and time to rest, so she just wished Noah good night. The only bright spot she left behind was the dessert, a gift she had brought him with a pure heart. This tore Noah up inside. He felt terrible about the way he had been with her. After seeing the night, Lucia felt a chill, a deep chill, and it wasn't because of the weather. Suddenly, someone covered her eyes, and for a moment, she felt a glimmer of hope. But when the girl turned around and saw Prince Leonardo, her heart warmed a little. Still, Lucy started throwing pillows at him, blaming him for sneaking up on her like that. Leo just wanted to surprise her, but guessed he overdid it a bit. Looking at her face, he saw she had tears in her eyes. It was obvious the lady had been crying. Lady Aurelius wiped the bitter tears from the corner of her eyes, insisting she wasn't crying now. She just felt like a fool and couldn't stop the tears. Her tears quickly sobered Leo up, and he draped his cloak over her, apologizing that he didn't expect her to shed tears of joy. Maybe he should have shown up sooner. How could she not cry, seeing something so beautiful? That's why Leo offered to show her something even more magical. That night, under the incredibly beautiful starry sky, the second prince escorted the lady to the rooftop. They were almost there. They had never been this close, and it sent a fiery sensation through both of them. The endless sea of stars was filled with mystery and light, and in the deep black void, the stars looked like sparkling jewels. That cold and distant space stirred up all sorts of emotions, making you forget the trivialities of everyday life. But even here, Lucia's mind was still on whether she had made Noah angry. Suddenly, Leonardo decided to apologize again, saying he didn't know she would react that way. Lucia felt it was no big deal. She was just so stressed that she suddenly broke down. If she ever needed to vent again, he promised he would be there for her. She was quiet today, lost in thought, not even smiling. The truth was, she felt like a failure. She had hurt people close to her, and even as a child, she had messed everything up. What a coincidence! Leo was a total failure too. The young lady had no idea how badly he had messed things up as a child. Everything he touched, he ruined. I tell you, he was a nightmare for teachers and tutors. Everyone would suddenly get sick and have to return to their hometown. Through all those years, only Maria stayed with him. She was always there for him, helping him. So His Majesty felt that since they were both failures, they needed to stick together. This night of confession really cheered Lucy up, adding a touch of magic and romance to her life. By the time Leo finished his amusing stories from his childhood, he noticed the girl had fallen fast asleep. Guess he talked for too long, but now he didn't want the young lady to fall. This was starting to get on his nerves. Lady Aurelius was always falling asleep around him. Maybe she felt safe around him, which was ridiculous because she was nothing to him. She was just a means to an end. But tonight, the second prince's heart was beating unusually fast. Lucy was sleeping soundly when she suddenly felt Noah's arms around her. Seeing him so close, she couldn't help but shed a tear. She had been dreaming of seeing him for so long. All this time, she thought he was angry with her. But according to Noah, it was all because of her. Staring at the night, Lucy was accused of being at fault for everything. But the Noah before her was not the same. The blood in his eyes terrified her. She clung to him in fear, praying for it all to go away. She felt incredibly guilty, but most of all, she didn't want Noah to leave. In that moment, all she heard was a faint echo. "Lucy, you're a good-for-nothing. It would have been better if you were never born." If it weren't for her, her whole family would still be alive. To everyone, the girl was a cursed child. Everywhere she went, she brought death. The pain consumed her sanity. The voices around her asked too many questions and repeated one thing. All this chaos was Lucy's fault, and she owed a huge apology to everyone she had messed up. The girl woke up in her room in a cold sweat, looked around, and realized it was just a nightmare. But the tears wouldn't stop streaming from her eyes. Mom would never say something like that. Of course not. That's what Lucy tried to tell herself. It was just a stupid dream. The next morning, the maids were gossiping about the lady's poor appetite and lack of sleep. She had been waking up trembling for several days in a row. She had gotten better for a while, and now the nightmares were back. They still didn't know if her kidnappers had been caught, but obviously the Duke wouldn't let it go when he returned. Since the incident, Lucia hadn't spent much time with Noah. He was training like crazy with the other guards. Whenever she had the chance, the lady would follow him, making sure he was nearby. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that he was avoiding her. Honestly, Lucy missed him. He was constantly on her mind, and she couldn't stop thinking about him. Seeing him today, she suggested they have some tea or lemonade together. The weather was getting warmer, and Noah had been here for a while. But when he said they could do it another day, she understood. Because honestly, that another day would never come. Another week passed, and Lucia Aurelius was doing well with her lessons. She learned all the history of the Aurelius family and memorized all the important relatives Lucy knew. She hadn't seen Leo since that night. He spent all his time hunting in the forest. Lucy still couldn't get this damn ring off, but she had figured out how to tell Arthur. It was a good thing Theo was on her side, but she couldn't just replace the real Lucy. She still needed to find her way home. So today she asked Noah to take her to the lake, the one where he first found her. She had only had one riding lesson with Theo. Even if the young lady was treating this as training, she didn't want to embarrass herself. But Noah had been so distant lately. The horses were ready. Noah was there, and Lucy missed him like crazy. She had been so depressed since then, so the guy wasn't even sure if he was doing the right thing anymore. Noticing he was very pale, the young lady wanted to confirm if he was okay. Not really. It would all be over soon. Noah wasn't ready, but it was for the best. Soon he would have to leave his lady. She was getting married. At the thought of it, his hands trembled as he helped her onto her horse. They had to leave now if they wanted to make it back before dark. Soon Lucia would finally be happy, and even when she had completely forgotten him, Noah would still love her. And so, they finally set off, beginning a short trip on horseback deep into the forest. Along the way, the knight's condition clearly worsened, but he kept pushing on, thinking the journey wasn't much longer. Watching him, Lucia couldn't bring herself to speak, feeling as if an ice wall had been erected between them. The place where Noah had first met the girl was by a roaring waterfall in the forest. But when Lucia arrived, she found nothing there. She had been sure she would find answers here. It turned out to be just an ordinary lake. The girl didn't even know how she had gotten here, nor did she remember what happened. Just as she decided to ask the knight about the place, Noah suddenly buckled and fell to the ground. Then deep night fell. A bright, porcelain-white moon rose over the forest, illuminating the intricate paths. Although medical supplies were scarce, Lucy managed to stitch and clean Noah's wound. Considering how badly he was injured and had been training, it could have been much worse, but he seemed to have only a minor infection. The girl gave him willow bark tea to ease the pain, but then he noticed tears in her eyes. The knight could rest now, and they would head home at dawn. He would need at least a week to recover. Noah intended to escort the young lady back to the manor, but he then stated he would not be staying. He had already spoken with the headmaid. She had found a very suitable replacement for the young lady, and now that Lucy knew how to get here, Noah believed she no longer needed him and that he shouldn't stay by her side. He was just an orphan, and an orphan was not worthy of being the personal knight to the future crown princess. Hearing this, Lucy wondered who said he wasn't worthy, and what was this about her being the future crown princess? The girl was to marry the crown prince. Noah had learned this from his conversation with the headmaid. It was clear now. The guy had decided to leave her because of his talk with the headmaid. But no one had even asked for her opinion. It seemed no one cared what she wanted. Since this whole thing began, she had thought he was the only one she could rely on. Everything was a mess. The broken engagement, her return, Theodore, and now the knight was injured because of her. What on earth was he thinking, hiding his injury from her? She just didn't understand. She couldn't force him to stay, so if this was what he truly wanted, she would let him go. But the man chose another path, a path of forgiveness. He knelt before her on one knee and asked for her forgiveness. He felt he wasn't worthy of her, that she deserved better. Lucy worried if she had unintentionally given him that idea, but that wasn't the case at all. And Noah had been avoiding her all this time, and he felt incredibly guilty about it now. He had lied about being fine, all because he didn't want to make Lucia worry. In her eyes, Noah was an idiot, a complete fool, and he was blaming himself for it too. He had made a huge mistake. He had messed up in front of the woman he loved, and he had been deceiving himself all this time. The truth was, the guy was in too deep to let go of his lady. There was no turning back now. Noah loved his lady, and he had finally found the courage to admit it. He loved Lucia. After calming down, Lucia apologized for calling him an idiot and a fool. But the knight thought she was right, which made the girl burst out laughing. After that, they finally set off for home. This time, Lucy and Noah rode the same horse, and she quickly fell asleep on the way. It wasn't surprising. He had heard she hadn't been sleeping well lately. His dear lady, she was finally by his side, and her scent alone was enough to intoxicate Noah. His warm touch woke his lady, who didn't even remember falling asleep. It seemed they had been away from the manor for a while. Her brothers must be worried sick. The forest had been sunny and beautiful all day, but then the sky suddenly grew dark with clouds, and thunder rumbled. Noah said, "This isn't good. We'd better find shelter from the rain quickly." It was getting dark, and a storm was coming. There was a not far from here. It wasn't safe to be outside after sunset. Legend had it that certain creatures roamed these parts, and some said they were monsters. Others said they were just animals. Noah wasn't superstitious, but with Lucia here, he didn't want to take any chances. Her safety came first. He was so close. She had never been this close to any man. His lips looked so soft, and she couldn't seem to stop thinking about it. Lucia was stunned by her own thoughts, trying to tell herself it was purely unintentional. Noah was injured, and she was just helping him with his wound. Then she had hugged him emotionally. I mean, anyone would get emotional in a situation like that, right? Lucia was just happy the knight wasn't pushing her away anymore, so she figured that's why she couldn't stop thinking about him. Suddenly, the horse neighed and stopped, and Noah held the girl tightly. Due to the sudden jolt, Lucia leaned back, feeling the knight's firm body behind her. He slowly turned her head to the side, and she saw a huge dire wolf. From the man's expression, he wasn't afraid. He said the wolf wouldn't attack as long as they didn't make sound. Of course, that made perfect sense in this situation. Noah held his lady tightly. He suggested they stay quiet so as not to startle the horse. The pack was already leaving. Sir Noah had encountered them many times in the mountains. They never attacked, but you could never be too sure. Surprisingly, Miss Aurelius wasn't scared at all because her brave knight was right by her side. They had to hurry. It looked like it was about to pour. A short while later, the tavern doors swung open, and the unexpected guests were warmly welcomed. Lady Lucia was told she was in luck. They had only one room left, perfect for her and her husband. But the hostess didn't think they looked like a married couple, so she asked for the young man's name. In fact, she was really hoping to get to know him a little better. Gwen chimed in that Patricia was busy enough serving those drinks. Though busy, Patricia first invited the guest to have a bite with her, sure that his sister wouldn't mind. Not expecting such a direct approach, Lucia dramatically grabbed Noah's arm and leaned in affectionately. They couldn't risk being stranded outside in this weather, so she announced that she and her husband would take the room. Of course, Noah played along with his darling, gently kissing her hand to show their undying love. Gwen noted what a thoughtful husband the lady had and personally showed them to their room. Lucy didn't know why she had lied. She could have said he was her brother, or at least some kind of cousin. Now, after everything that had happened today, she didn't know how to look him in the eye. Being called madam like that felt amazing, so Noah hoped he hadn't come on too strong. The storm was getting worse, and these two were lucky to find a vacant room. They finally arrived, but the most expensive room wasn't very private, containing a dozen separate beds. Lucy thought it wasn't so bad. The room was perfect as it was. At least things wouldn't be so awkward in such a large room. Fortunately, everything went smoothly. Noah had been worried he'd have to sleep on the floor or worse. Gwen just couldn't figure out if the room met the standards of the lady's husband. The boy blushed at that. He was satisfied with everything, but Lucy realized he wasn't thrilled about sleeping in the same room as her. That being the case, the hostess decided to go get what the lady had asked for. She secretly hoped these two sweethearts would one day tie the knot. The first thing Miss Aurelius did was make Noah change his clothes so she could check his wound again. Without thinking, Noah called her darling again and immediately realized what he'd said. The young lady then apologized for lying. She just wasn't sure they could have gotten a room if they weren't married. That night, Lucia felt a strong sense of unease, though she didn't know why. The night had been so warm and kind to her lately. They had long since moved beyond a simple knight and lady relationship. In a world that was trying to get rid of her, Noah protected her. She saw him as a close friend. She thought he felt the same way, but it seemed she was wrong. For the first time, she suspected he might have more feelings for her. Her heart skipped a beat when Noah entered the room. He wanted to know if she was cold so he could get more firewood for the hearth. However, looking into his eyes, Lucy couldn't shake the feeling that she had been blind all this time. He had to take those bandages off today. They were soaked from the rain. He was such a tough guy. The wound must be hurting like hell. Lucy's heart ached at the thought of him enduring so much pain because of her. She worried her hands would be cold when she touched him, but he said they were warm. In fact, the wound was inflamed, and he had a fever. On top of all that, he might have caught a cold. Noah didn't think he was feverish from the wound. He was just embarrassed after everything that had happened today. In her view, none of this would have happened if she hadn't been so dense, and she felt guilty. She just thought she saw a close friend, but that was impossible. Noah was just doing his duty. He didn't think she should apologize for him getting hurt. Any knight would have done the same. This made her wonder if she had imagined it all. Her only hope was that Noah understood she wouldn't stop him if he wanted to leave. Noah suddenly realized he hadn't told her he wasn't planning to leave. He probably had other things on his mind. But if he did leave, he just needed to know that Miss Aurelius couldn't have asked for a better night. Noah felt he couldn't just leave his lady like this. He would only go if she sent him away. The atmosphere became so awkward that Lucia suddenly suggested they go downstairs for a bite to eat. Just as she tried to stand up, her legs got tangled in her long nightgown, and she realized she was going to fall. Noah was too close, and she ended up falling right on his bare chest, her lips crashing into his. Unbelievable, but it seemed it had really happened. Miss Aurelius was horrified by what she had just done, and even forgot to breathe for a moment. From the knight's expression, he was even more shocked, completely frozen. There was a trace of blood on his lip. All her confidence deflated from her like a popped balloon, and she quickly ran downstairs. Noah had never felt such an intense emotion. His heart was pounding so hard it short-circuited his brain. The tavern was lively tonight, with everyone celebrating, but Lady Lucia was still completely out of it. When the guy approached her, she barely managed to squeeze out an apology. But Noah looked perfectly calm, as if nothing had happened. He simply invited her to dance. Dancing allows you to show your true side, reveal who you really are, and feel more powerful. It is a secret language of the soul, expressing wordless emotions through movement, rhythm, and intimacy. Yet, even in this passionate atmosphere, Lucy still felt like a wooden doll. Remembering what had just happened, she apologized for busting his lip. So close, Noah told her to stop apologizing, as he knew she didn't mean it. He could tell from her movements that she wasn't much of a dancer, even though he had probably danced with countless women. To be honest, Lady Lucia was the first person he had ever truly worked up the courage to ask to dance. His uncle had taught him, saying every gentleman should learn to dance, even if they lived in the middle of nowhere. It was nothing like a party, though. He was a strict teacher, and the boy couldn't understand why he had to learn it back then. Back then, Noah thought someone like him would never have a use for it. But here he was putting it to great use, and, surprisingly, he was even starting to enjoy it now. In his careful yet strong hands, Lucia blossomed like the first spring flower in a garden. The music allowed them to connect for the first time, expressing their intimacy and sharing their tenderness in the rhythm of the dance. Just yesterday, they might have gone a whole day without saying a word, and now they were expressing passion and love with every move and touch of the dance. Love became real, and the world around them seemed to freeze. The moment was filled with magic as Lucia twirled in the dance. She was having so much fun and wanted to dance a little longer, but suddenly, with a bang, Leo appeared and she fell into his arms. The day before, Theodore had kept the maid waiting for a long time, and he was starting to think she wouldn't show up at all. When she finally arrived, the girl apologized profusely, but said the lady wouldn't be able to come until after lunch. It turned out she had gone riding with her knight and would be back later. Theodore had no idea what she was planning. She had been avoiding him all week, which was strange to think about. He remembered she had even seemed a bit depressed. Honestly, Theo didn't care if she was sad, as long as she was useful. She wouldn't just run off like that. It seemed he didn't truly realize this until the thought of her abandoning him again crossed his mind. The next morning came, and Lucia skipped all of Theo's lessons. He couldn't even believe she showed up so late. Something strange had been happening at the palace since early this morning. The entire court and all the knights were crowded in the main hall. Linda ordered them to start the search from the northern forest. She didn't know that was what a lady liked to ride. Theodore didn't understand what all the commotion was about and decided to ask Linda what was going on. Her face turned white as a sheet when the maid said Lady Lucia hadn't returned yesterday. Just then, the prince walked into the courtyard. The Crimson Lion witnessed their conversation, a whole deer slung over his shoulder. The servants were terrified, whispering about the bandage on his eye, saying His Highness must have been injured outside. Theodore respectfully stated it was their private matter and asked them not to disturb the royal family. Nevertheless, Leonardo was sure that if the future crown princess of Ashanur was truly missing, the royal family would certainly take action, just as he was about to. But first, he needed to figure out what had happened. He would not back down in his search for Lady Lucia. The knights returned to the forest, but they still didn't understand why a noble lady would come here. The thought of the lady coming here alone was terrifying, but then again, she wasn't alone. Was she? The commander remembered her strange knight and thought they must be together, or perhaps she had run away. Noticing the commander's rambling, Sir Leonardo suggested he shut up. Magnus thought a storm was coming and they needed to return soon. Besides, these forests were dangerous. Despite the many rumors about this place, that was precisely why Leo continued his search. Everything that had just happened gave the rookie the creeps. Lionel was more than just the prince's right-hand man. After the king and queen passed away, Lord Leonis, Lionel's father, had raised the second prince as his own son. He was like an older brother to him, even closer than the crown prince. They had never fought. If Lucia was lost in these forests, Leo really didn't have time for this. She was in big trouble. Lionel didn't see what the big deal was. Was he even listening? According to the prince, Lady Lucia Aurelius was already engaged to the crown prince of Ashanur. Lionel thought the girl was just a decoy. Not only that, but they didn't even know who she was. She just looked the part. The second prince was already convinced, but she had no idea who had ordered the kidnapping. Lord Cedric was sure she was the real deal and had sent a doctor to help. Fortunately, she was somehow resistant to poison, so His Highness got rid of him. He truly hoped Lionel wouldn't find out that the Crimson Lion had killed a council member for some woman. The storm grew stronger, and the rain fell relentlessly, making travel difficult. So the party of knights took shelter in a local tavern. As usual, running into Lucia was a complete accident. Leo's gaze locked on her from the doorway as she danced gracefully. This was how he caught her off guard when she least expected to see him, let alone fall into his arms. The sight of him made the lady hold her breath, but what surprised her most was the eye patch. Leo said it was just a scratch, but Lucia was still worried. He should at least clean the wound. She asked how he got hurt, but all she got was a brilliant smile and a loving gaze. Honestly, the guy really enjoyed her reaction. He reached out and gently touched her lips, saying the most important thing was that she wasn't hurt. It turned out his lady wanted to see something, but they had run into some trouble. Feeling a tap on her back, the girl turned around and saw the lovely Noah standing behind her. The search party had come a long way. His Highness's men were exhausted, so he sent the knight to feed the horses. Lucia tried to object, but Noah calmed her and agreed. Without a doubt, the girl felt uneasy after that encounter. She was worried about Leo's injury. The captain then asked Lady Lucia to join them for dinner, but she told them to go ahead without her. The storm was getting more violent. Thunder crashed around the tavern. This sent Noah deep into his memories. Visions flashed and voices echoed, making him dizzy. This strange feeling wouldn't let him rest. It was probably all the rain's fault. Just as the knight thought, the horses had already been fed. When he went to ask His Highness why he had been summoned, the knight was met with a heavy blow to the face. With a clap of thunder, he fell hard into the mud, and the cold rain began to beat down on him. But the Lion of Molina would not tolerate such weakness. He made the boy get up. After letting the knights go to dinner first, Lucia thought it was for the best. It would be awkward to eat at the same table as the crown prince's fiancé. Eating cookies in the attic was fine by her. She had never imagined this trip would turn out like this. The girl didn't even know what she was expecting. The lake was completely ordinary. I guess this all meant she wasn't going home, but she couldn't stop thinking about her grandmother. Suddenly, there were voices from downstairs. The man was worried about his wife, but it was just a baby kicking. Okay, that's enough. Her husband was more nervous about this pregnancy than she was. She had heard him crying again this morning. He couldn't help it. He was just so damn happy. Lucia couldn't help but notice how sweet they were. They were going to be parents soon, and that was wonderful. She wondered if she would ever be a mother one day. Maybe one day, she and Noah could be the parents of a beautiful little baby. These thoughts made Lucy jump, not even sure how she had gotten there. Feeling dizzy, Lucy's imagination started to run wild. A little baby with golden hair calling her mama in that sweet, innocent voice. It went straight to her heart. I think she was really falling in love with the feeling. The rain was coming down harder. Noah was trembling all over, barely able to stand. Even Leonardo was starting to like this night, but this couldn't go on forever. Seeing the intense light in His Highness's eyes, Noah felt a strange sensation inside, as if he were a child again. The Crimson Lion, shrouded in mystery, was ruthless and would stop at nothing to get what he wanted. He had no intention of waiting. He slammed into the night, demanding again why he and Lady Lucia were traveling alone. Thunder roared in Noah's mind, and he felt like his skull was about to split open. The pain was like a red-hot poker stabbing into his brain, so intense that the boy collapsed. Just then, agony washed over him. He could almost hear a voice telling him to run. A vision of his mother flashed before his eyes, still desperately searching for her son. But then, the little prince peeked out from behind the throne. She had finally found her little rascal. Mama had told Noah countless times not to mess with Grandpa's chair, but Grandpa didn't mind the little prince playing there. He was drawn to something on it. One day he would sit here, Grandpa's beloved feline. The king was sure he would be the finest of them all. He only hoped he would live to see that day. Mama clutched the child tightly, fleeing the war. Noah's tears mixed with the rain. That was his mother. A bolder, angrier clap of thunder birthed a creature from the depths. With the lightning came a dragon, an ancient and powerful being, the embodiment of the night's ancestors' wrath, the peerless Noah. Leonardo couldn't believe what he had just seen. He couldn't believe it was a dragon. They had been extinct for a long time, so what had happened seemed impossible. Noah left dejectedly, but Leo couldn't believe the guy hadn't seen anything. The storm swept in, illuminating the forest, and a giant white wolf, a true beast, emerged from the dense woods. Haunted by what he had seen, the knight returned to the tavern, pain and sorrow shadowing him. He once had a family, a home, a mother. It was hard to believe they were just gone. A familiar voice startled Noah from his thoughts. Lucia met him in the hallway. Seeing him, she smiled, her eyes sparkling with joy. She had been looking for him, but for the first time, Noah didn't look happy to see her. His face was a mask of despair and pain. Oblivious, Lucy said she was just taking a walk and wanted to see if he had fed the horses. At that moment, the heartbroken young man couldn't take it anymore and collapsed on her shoulder, his only safe harbor, all he had left. Barely holding back unbearable pain, he asked if he could just stay there for a moment. The knight trembled all over, clinging to the young lady. But she couldn't even believe he was crying. The storm was getting louder, and Lucy couldn't hear anything, but she needed to know what was happening. In this crucial moment, Noah was choked up and couldn't say a word. He just wanted to be close to her, to feel another's warmth. The pain of loss was immeasurable, and despair washed over him like a cold wave. Seeking comfort, the young man held his lady tightly. The next morning, Alexander's sister was returned safely. Upon his arrival a few hours earlier, he had been told his sister was missing and that His Highness had already gone to find her. Sir Alexander expressed his deepest apologies for not being able to help, but Leonardo didn't need them. He was happy to do it. Last night, Noah couldn't bring himself to speak to Lucia. All he did was apologize. His clothes were soaked, and he didn't want to get her dress wet. He suddenly said he had run into some real jokers on his way to the stables who gave him a very warm welcome. Seeing him so upset, Lady Lucia was also depressed. She knew immediately that Leo was behind it. "A bed has been prepared for you, my lady," said the captain. They had asked the innkeeper so that Lucy could have some privacy. Besides, the Duke would have their hides if he found out they had slept in the same room as the lady. "Now you all need to get some rest before you leave." Lucia wished the knight a good night. Noah bowed and quietly left, but the girl shot Leonardo a harsh glare. It seemed he had somehow annoyed his lady. He actually found it quite cute. The second prince had definitely seen it, but that was impossible. Dragons were just rumors these days. They had gone extinct long ago. He was sure only legends and stories of them remained. Leo couldn't sleep that night, so he watched the sleeping Lucia, who was probably having sweet dreams. But honestly, no lady slept like that. She was too down to earth. The thoughtful prince covered her with a blanket. He still wasn't sure if she was mad at him. His little lady, she couldn't stay mad forever. He had already won her heart. Honestly, Leonardo didn't like to share, so he decided to take what was his. Her sweet lips. Just then, he felt someone grab the back of his neck and pull him away. The furious knight dragged his highness into a dark corner and punched him hard in the jaw. Noah thought it was despicable of him to just interrupt their conversation and walk away without a word. The second prince could tell this bastard was really strong. He even flinched. A while ago, Leo had wondered who he was. The truth was, Noah was his lady's knight. If his highness ever made a move like that again, this knight would take him down, prince or not. After everything that had happened, Miss Aurelius returned home safely the next morning. Rumor had it that a mysterious do-gooder was going around as the Avenger. Theodore remained silent during his conversation with the second prince. Of all the people who could have gotten involved, he couldn't figure out why it had to be the Crimson Lion. Honestly, Lucia could have come back on her own. She was just caught in the storm. Besides, Sir Noah was with her the whole time. Even so, her brother was furious about her reckless behavior. He had no idea what had possessed her to wander so deep into the forest. Hearing that Lucy just wanted to confirm something, Alexander flew into a rage, saying she should have taken guards with her. As for that night, he was supposed to ensure the future crown princess returned on time. They told Alexander that he had overstepped his bounds, and he agreed with the head maid that Noah had to leave the Aurelius estate. When a knight heard that his master was looking for some noble knights for Lucia, a spark flashed in his eyes. As you'd expect, she resisted. She had already chosen Noah, and in her eyes, he was her one and only knight. As for whether he stayed or left, that was entirely up to him to decide. To set things right, Alexander declared that he was in charge of the family while their father was away and before Lucy was married. Since he was making her choose from the knights he suggested, she decided to make things clear. Lucia owed him her life, and if he left the Aurelius estate, she would go with him. Just then, a maid came in to announce that the doctor had arrived. So Lucia had Jane take Sir Noah to the doctor, saying she planned to get some rest in the meantime. Although Noah was convinced he was fine and didn't need a doctor, he would never dare to disobey his lady's orders. Seeing his chance, Theodore rushed to his sister, grabbing her arm to drag her away. He squeezed her hand so tightly that Lucia finally had enough and violently shook his arm off. The guy was acting as if his sister had gone mad. Alexander got angry out of concern, but this guy was just being absurd. She knew very well that he didn't care about her safety at all. Theo flew into a rage, accusing her of having no common sense or decency, and even called her an idiot. He couldn't believe she was arguing with Alexander over a second-rate night. Unwilling to tolerate this disrespect any longer, Lucy retorted that she didn't want to talk to him right now. He was simply a jerk with a weird temper, so she didn't even want to bother with him. The lady was just tired and wanted to rest, so she suggested they resume their lessons after lunch tomorrow. She went to the garden in the morning. Tomorrow was an important day, but she couldn't muster any enthusiasm. The problem was, in her situation, she had no other choice. Hearing her name being called, the girl turned around to see Noah appearing by her side like a character from a fairy tale. He was supposed to be resting now. The doctor had checked his injuries, but the boy really wanted to see his lady. But if Lucy wanted to be alone, he was prepared to leave, but she definitely didn't want that. Seeing the knight's battered body, the doctor could only guess in horror what he had been through. What was worse, he had been training in this condition. These young people always try to push themselves too hard. The old man was surprised that the boy hadn't developed a serious infection with wounds like that. He didn't know who had stitched him up, but that person had done an excellent job. This knight was very lucky. He'd best stay in bed for now. The wounds were severe and could lead to some nasty complications, unpleasant ideas, a fever, or even reckless behavior. The potion could disturb his system and his mind. The effects wouldn't last long, and not everyone would experience problems. It sounded promising, and Noah should have listened. He told Lucia the doctor just gave him some medicine and told him to go to sleep now. The guy was feeling hot and restless inside. He felt dizzy and lightheaded. That's why Lucia decided to go check on him, certain that his wounds were still hurting. When she touched his face, Noah felt her tenderness and said he could take care of himself. He wished she would let him get hurt once in a while. He'd heal anyway, and what she said before had really touched him. Lucia had blurted out that if he were kicked out of the estate, she would follow him. It was reckless, but amazing. So even if she only said it to protect him, he was immensely grateful. But honestly, when she said those words, she was completely serious. This woman had turned Noah's heart completely upside down, and he had to keep it all suppressed inside. When Noah asked if she really knew what she was saying, he leaned in so close he could feel her breath. He turned away almost immediately, blushing, not even knowing why he suddenly wanted to do that. Just then, Lucia's heart began to pound as if it would leap out of her chest. She didn't even know what she was expecting. To be honest, she was probably fantasizing about the handsome knight grabbing her with his gentle hands and holding her tight. Noah was sure his uncle would accept her too. It was his uncle who had raised him and taught him how to dance. Miss Aurelius was eager to meet him, and she bet Noah must have been adorable as a child. That silver hair, that chubby little face, she would pay a fortune for a glimpse. Noah might be able to arrange that, but he said he wanted to see what she looked like as a child too. In the end, Lucia fell asleep again, and like a true knight, Noah held his girl in his arms. It was surprising how quickly she fell asleep. It made him a little worried. She woke with a start, realizing she had dozed off again. The sleepless nights must have finally caught up with her. It turned out Noah had carried her all the way here despite his injuries, and had fallen asleep sitting by her side. Noah, her precious knight. Lucia didn't even know when she had fallen in love with him. Looking at him, she was drawn to him like a moth to a flame. A crazy impulse washed over her, and the moment her lips touched his cheek, Noah grabbed her and kissed her sweet, tempting lips. The world seemed to stop, and in that one kiss, something new and fragile blossomed in her heart. She understood everything the night had left unsaid. His lips meeting hers, that stolen kiss was worth more than any kingdom he could conquer. Noah was completely in love with her. After confessing his feelings, the exhausted guy collapsed right on top of Lady Lucia. Lucia felt incredibly shy, with a storm of crazy emotions churning in her chest, not even knowing what had just happened. Well, night turned to morning, and the bright sun peeked through the window, bringing in the fresh air. Lucia still couldn't believe that after all that, the night had just passed out cold. Still, it would have been even more awkward if he hadn't fallen asleep. Lucy decided to slip away while she still could. Surprisingly, the guy was as heavy as a tank, but she still managed to wriggle out from under him and fell onto the floor. She couldn't shake the memory of his confession. She couldn't sleep at all after that. In any case, she hoped he wasn't just talking nonsense when he said those things. Ever since Lucy fell into this crazy world, the knight had been protecting her. Now, it was her turn to take the initiative and handle things herself. There had been no news from Magnus since they left the port. They should have entered the North Sea by now. They were expected back in a month, and the Crown Prince wanted everything to be ready for their arrival. He wanted to strengthen security and add more guards at the port, but he wanted them dressed like common people. The aide-de-camp was a bit surprised that the only thing His Highness was worried about was that Vigilante group. Arthur knew the Vigilante group had killed a council member, and he bet they would be even more aggressive on Coronation Day. Besides, if they heard the princess was on her way back, she could become a target too. His Majesty didn't think it was just an ordinary mercenary group or a bunch of common thieves. He was sure it was something else, with greater interests at stake. He had to find out what was really going on. When His Majesty suddenly had a visitor, he told the servant to turn her away, as he was swamped with work right now. It must be that lady again. She kept showing up, and he was getting sick of it. But upon hearing that the visitor was Miss Aurelius, Arthur immediately stopped the servant. His Majesty was very excited to finally be able to see her. He was sorry for making her wait so long. Lucia had shown up without an appointment, but promised not to take up too much of his time. Once Arthur understood the full picture, he demanded an explanation, like what on earth had happened. It seemed the butterfly had finally broken free from the spider's web, but she was not out of danger yet. In fact, she was here to give him her answer. She agreed. She would pretend to be his bride until the coronation, but after that, she wanted the crown prince to announce their breakup. Oh, and she needed His Majesty to sign a contract. As soon as Arthur read the terms of the contract, he knew this lady didn't trust him one bit. Since he hadn't given her a reason to trust him completely, although Lucy wasn't sure if he would accept the contract, She wanted to make sure that if the political situation was as tense as he said, she would do her part to help him prevent things from getting out of control. In any case, he and Claire would meet and get married sooner or later, but she didn't care about that anymore. If Lucy's identity was exposed, she would go to prison, and she wouldn't be the only one to suffer. Considering the Duke's influence, Theodore and Alexander would be fine. But Noah, she had to protect him no matter what. I, Lucia Aurelius, daughter of Duke Nicholas Aurelius, hereby promise to fulfill the duties of the Crown Princess until the coronation. In return, Crown Prince Arthur Felix the First must fulfill one condition. Lucy didn't even see His Majesty lean in so close. Did he not realize how much she disdained him? The Crown Prince, by his royal decree, promises to protect the applicant, the Aurelius estate, and its subordinates. The Crown Prince solemnly swears that under no circumstances will he take Lucia's life, either by his own hand or by giving the order. He understood now. The lady wanted to break off the engagement because she was convinced he would make such a demand. Arthur just wanted to know why. She could have asked for anything: money, power, land, even a title. And yet, her only request of His Majesty was not to harm her. Actually, it wasn't just her, but her people, her brothers, her knight. Lucy wanted Arthur to promise to protect them no matter what. But His Majesty was curious. Where was her loyal knight? Shouldn't he be by her side? According to her, Noah was injured and not with her at the moment. Even so, if Arthur needed to think about her proposal, she would come back tomorrow. But right after, he told her there was no need. He agreed to her terms. He promised that, no matter what, the people of Lucia Aurelius would be under the protection of the crown. But he had a condition too. Until Arthur was officially declared king, she was to play the part of the future queen well. Outside of their agreement, to everyone else, they would be a loving couple for the next few months. Lucia would accompany him as before. Any banquets, balls, all kinds of dances, they would attend together. Before considering becoming his queen again, Miss Aurelius was laying down the law. He was no longer dealing with the same woman as before. In fact, Arthur could say the same. Simple words, yet they sent a chill down Lucy's spine. It was rare for things to go so smoothly, but something fell off. A scream echoed in the palace. An intruder was running towards the west wing, and it seemed Lucia had run right into him. She barely managed to cry for help before the freak in the mask and Hood grabbed her and dragged her away. He held her tightly, successfully hiding as the guards rushed down the hall. In this situation, the guy held a knife to her throat and told her not to move, and Lucia froze in fear. He also told her not to look up, but through the black hood, she caught a glimpse of bright red hair. That voice, Lucy was sure she had never heard it before, but it felt familiar for some reason. Leonardo felt terrible. He never wanted to restrain his lady like this, but he couldn't risk getting caught. Seeing him still there, the captain shouted that he had found the culprit in the courtyard. "Now, sir, you can finally let the girl go," he said as he lowered the blade. "I don't want to hurt her." But Lucia saw this as her chance. She kicked the scoundrel hard in the vitals and followed up with a punch to his face. Just as another knight, Max, approached, they both saw the culprit being taken down by the young lady, and both were stunned. The guards rushed over immediately, but the culprit decided to flee. The feisty young lady didn't want him to get away and threw her shoe at him. Unsurprisingly, it didn't work. Max came over to make sure the lady was all right. For a thief to be able to slip past the royal guard, there had to be an explanation. After all this, Prince Arthur rushed to Lady Lucia, worried about her condition. She had certainly expected a commotion, but the pressure was more than she had imagined. She angrily pushed his hand away and coldly retorted that everything was fine and it didn't matter what happened here anyway. According to the butler, the lady was thankfully unhurt, but they had called for a doctor just in case. But Lucia insisted it wasn't necessary, saying she didn't get a good look at the man's face or recognize his voice. Noticing how pale she was, Sir Arthur thoughtfully suggested she stay the night. The lady was not having it. She really wanted to go home. It had been a difficult day. Arthur didn't want to argue and only agreed to let her go on the condition that he and his guards would accompany her. Lucia shouldn't forget their agreement. After all, if they wanted to fool everyone, it was best to let the rumors spread. Now back at the Aurelius Lakeside Villa, she found it hard to imagine spending the next few months like this. She was still wondering if she had made the right decision. Fortunately, Noah was there to greet her when she got home, and her heart finally felt calm and at peace again. Seeing him made the lady feel like she was floating on a cloud, with 1,000 butterflies fluttering wildly inside her. Flowers can speak to the heart in ways words cannot express. It is the true language of love. Like a delicate flower blooming at sunrise, Lucia blossomed just from a single smile from her knight. She threw herself into his arms without hesitation. Now she was sure she had made the right choice. Everyone had seen Prince Arthur and Lady Lucia. He had carried her all the way back from the West Wing. The maids felt that the crown prince had changed a lot since Lucia appeared. Despite this, she wanted to walk on her own, but Arthur just told her to hold on tight. He thought it would be better if she could tone down the "I can't stand you" vibe, at least until they were out of the garden and away from prying eyes. The nobles were coming and going from the palace more often, so there were definitely some nobles lurking in the garden. Arthur told the lady not to look back. He had already seen someone in the garden, which terrified Lucia. Clare wasn't here by chance. Lucia was waiting for the female lead to finally make her entrance. In truth, Miss Aurelius's heart belonged completely to her precious knight. She didn't even remember the moment she fell in love with him. His lady was so beautiful and enchanting that Noah was drawn to her like a moth to a flame. He couldn't resist, even for just a moment. Noah wanted to taste her lips and feel that connection. He was convinced it was just a dream. If it was just a dream, he couldn't hold back. Noah loved her, but restraint was becoming harder and harder. He hoped his beloved would have mercy on him. He had already lost everything. The last thing he wanted was to lose her forever. If he lost her too, the young man wouldn't be able to bear it. He was still thinking about it when he woke up, realizing it was just a dream. But what a dream it was. A few days later, His Majesty sent a carriage to pick up the young princess. From now on, they would have breakfast together every week. They had a lot to talk about. In fact, the crown prince was very grateful to Lucia, and she was just as grateful to him. This time, Lady Lucia would do everything right. This time things would be different. Noah still couldn't shake that dream. It had felt so real. The lady was so soft and smelled so sweet. After seeing that scene, it was hard to come back to reality, but he needed to pull himself together. Just then, Noah found his dear, beloved lady right in front of him. She ran to him without a word and gave him a big hug. Lucia had missed him so much today, but Noah's brain short-circuited. He didn't even know why he was reacting so strongly to a simple hug. He had held her before, so it was all because of that steamy dream. If Lucy told him what happened, if she told him about the thief, she was sure he would start blaming himself. Besides, she needed to talk to him about something else, something he might have forgotten. So the lady boldly suggested that a little kiss on the neck might jog his memory. Seeing his confused face, she apologized, saying she had meant to kiss his cheek. Still, Lucy really needed to see him tonight. She had something to tell him. The next day, the sky was overcast and a thunderstorm began, plunging the Aurelius' estate into darkness. Noticing that Theodore had been staring at her for a while, Lucia guessed he had something to say. When he suddenly asked where she was that morning, she explained that she needed to discuss something with the crown prince. Since Theo had read the diary, she was sure he knew she wanted to break off the engagement. The news hit the boy hard. He was sure they would get some dirt on her. However, Lucia thought she was the one who should be worried. Her little brother had made it clear that he didn't care about her safety at all. The truth was, he needed her alive to be useful. Theo had kept her secret. He tolerated her only because she had proven her worth, not because he liked having her around. The boy said that after the Ozener incident, she needed to study other kingdoms. Lucy had already picked out some books, but if her brother had more, she wanted to know. She had already mastered the basics of the Ionian language, but her pronunciation still needed practice. The lady's horse riding was getting better and better. She was making real progress. But the harp required more time, as her hand were cramping. Since she was cramping Theo's style, and he clearly couldn't stand having her around, she decided to go to the lakeside villa to practice, claiming it was on the other side of the estate with hardly any servants. Theo was sure she couldn't just leave like that. He felt the need to remind her that her words carried no weight here. She was no different from a servant or a slave. But he didn't get a single word of rebuttal, only seeing a flicker of sadness cross her face. Just then, the guy laid down the law, telling her she had to do exactly as he said. Lucia expected someone as educated as Theodore to behave better and use more respectful language. The world she came from wasn't perfect, and she wasn't anyone special there, but she always did her best, and she planned to keep trying here as well. Everything was a mess. Not a single thing was going according to plan. That night, as Lucia was walking down the hall, she heard a loud crash and looked toward the bathroom to find Noah had fallen. Luckily, he wasn't hurt. He had just wanted to wash his hair and slipped. It was a rather awkward situation, so she thoughtfully decided to lend a hand. Noah's wounds couldn't get wet, and I bet it was painful for him to even lift his arms right now. From his silence, it was obvious he didn't remember anything. It seemed the medicine the doctor gave him had worked. The boy was looking much better. Noah said the medicine was very effective and helpful, and now only some nasty bruises were left. Hearing this, Lucia started checking all over without even asking. She touched every single bruise on the knight's body, and Noah, embarrassed, covered himself with his robe. Only then did the girl realize her impoliteness. She should have at least asked first. Noah didn't want to embarrass her, but her reaction made him want to tease her some more. Since Lucy was the first woman to see his body, he said she had to pay the price. In her eyes, he was a jerk. He didn't even remember what he did and was talking about paying a price. But Lucy was a strong person, so she took responsibility for her actions without a second thought. She planted a kiss on her precious knight's forehead and asked how she could compensate him. It looked like the lady was playing him, but she just decided to have some fun with him. The girl's touch was so gentle, it felt really good. In fact, Lucy had something to tell the guy. It turned out she had accepted the crown prince's proposal, but she had only agreed to be his fiancé until the coronation. She had her reasons for pretending to love him. It seemed he wanted it to be convincing, so she decided to tell him everything. The lady didn't want Noah to get the wrong idea. No one else knew it was just an act. Tensions were high between the northern and western kingdoms, and now the prince was asking her to play along. Close to his beloved, Noah's only hope was that she was really just acting. He knew he had no right to ask, no right to want more, but damn it, he couldn't help but feel jealous. He shouldn't be bothered by this, right? Lucia's heart already belonged to someone else. She loved another man, but she was afraid he didn't know it, and that felt so wrong. The guy had kissed her and told her he loved her, and now he didn't remember a thing. This hit Noah like a bolt of lightning. It wasn't a dream. He fell to his knees, apologizing profusely. He felt he should never have. Before he could finish, Lucia's warm lips were on his. Her real name was Lucy. After all that, the guy forgot how to breathe. He struggled to catch his breath. She liked it when he called her lady, but she longed to hear Noah say her name just once. The moment the knight called out her name, her heart nearly leaped out of her chest. She had never felt like this before. The air became too heavy, so they agreed to talk again tomorrow. In fact, the female lead had been called that before. Leo had always called her by her name, but for some reason, hearing it from this guy felt completely different. They had never been so close, so passionate before. Lucia could barely calm down afterward. That night, Noah's mind was filled with nothing but Lucy. It was a complete spiritual baptism. Ever since Cena came into this world, her world, everything had gone completely off script. She couldn't shake the lingering feeling that she had been here before. Later, while choosing a dress, Lucia asked the lady to repeat what she had said. The lady was asking what kind of veil she wanted, one with jewels or one with lace. Of course, she could just choose a plain veil, but Lady Galet thought that wouldn't do the dress justice. Lady Lucia's maids couldn't believe she was leaving the estate so soon. It was all so strange. In the book, Lucia was the hated villain, but in the real world, it seemed everyone adored her, except for Theodore and the crown prince, though maybe Lady Lucia was missing something. Then again, she hadn't even finished the book, which she really regretted. In the end, Lady Galet left the girl alone with the dress, so they could get to know each other. Lucia had surely never worn such a beautiful dress. It was a pity it would never see a happy ending. She only hoped someone else could wear it one day, though she wished she could be the one to wear it to meet her fate. It was too early to think that far ahead. Lucy hadn't seen Noah since last night. She didn't even know what to say to him. Were they a couple? What about having children? It was all too soon. It was time to find someone to help her out of this dress. It sounded like someone was coming this way. The girl thought it was Lady Juliet, but it turned out to be the handsome Noah holding a bouquet of flowers. Seeing the lady in the white dress, the knight got flustered and thought he should come back later. When Lucy tried to stop him, she tripped on the steps and flew right into his arms. She didn't want him to leave. In fact, she was happy to see him, but from the look on his face, Noah didn't seem very happy to see her. The truth was, the guy was desperate to see her and couldn't wait. He hadn't slept all night and had so much to say, but this time he needed to ask for his lady's permission. In Noah's heart, he was not worthy of her. He had lost everything, had nothing to give, nothing to offer, yet he still dared to want her. He selfishly wanted Lucia. but he promised to become worthy of her. He would become a man she could be proud of. So the knight came before his lady to ask for permission, asking if Lucy would allow someone like him to love her. The future queen didn't hesitate for a moment. She would gladly let Noah love her. His beloved could now be sure that the young knight would keep his promise. Noah got so carried away that he messed up the lady's hair and makeup. He felt sorry, but Lucia was sure he didn't regret it, and indeed he didn't, because it was worth it to feel the girl's tenderness. Just then, Lady Galley's voice rang out. She had lost her bride-to-be. Noah immediately hid the young lady. It seemed the lady wouldn't have noticed them under the stairs if it weren't for that damn curious dog. Lucy thought it would be wise for them not to be so obvious next time. Her heart was about to pound out of her chest, so she didn't understand how Noah could be so calm. Suddenly, the boy apologized, saying he was just so excited that he forgot where he was for a moment and got a little carried away. It seemed that as long as Lucy loved him, nothing else bad in the world mattered. He was her knight in shining armor, and they were going to meet by the lake tonight. But for now, she told him to slip away quickly before he was discovered. After that, Lady Galette finally found her bride-to-be, so everything was settled. Lucia didn't want to leave his side, but she said she just needed some fresh air. The lady was still worried, as Lucia's face was redder than she had ever seen it before. It was at that moment that Lucy became absolutely certain Noah had been eavesdropping. The coronation ceremony was imminent, and the princess, of course, needed a stunning gown. Lady Galette was surprised when Lucia last said she wanted a butterfly-style dress. She hated insects. Lady Aurelius, however, loved the new gown, even though it gave her a sense of déjà vu suddenly. The thoughts made her world spin, and she collapsed to the floor, unconscious. That evening, a heavy rain poured down again, and the crown prince still couldn't sort out his thoughts. He and Lucia had been engaged all this time, but he had only truly met her recently. He had a strange feeling, as if she had always been by his side, and Arthur felt like he had been searching for her his entire life. There was something special about Lady Aurelius, something that felt all too familiar to him. It was as if the crown prince had seen her before, yet at the same time felt like he had known her his whole life. The rain grew heavier, and the sky was lit up by lightning. On that rainy night, a carriage stopped in front of the Aurelius estate. In the water, a young, helpless girl was drowning. The water was bottomless and turbulent, and it felt as if the current was slowly and steadily, almost gently, carrying her toward nothingness. But the peace was shattered when an ancient dragon, a true force of nature, appeared. After pulling the girl from the water, the young lad was ecstatic to find that she was still breathing. Years passed, and in the blink of an eye, the girl was 18. Time flew by so fast, and on her 18th birthday, she was terrified, worried that she would embarrass her father by not performing well. But a father's love is eternal, so no matter where he was, Lucy would always have a place with him. It was a very strange dream, and Lucy woke up feeling completely overwhelmed. She looked out the window and saw Noah standing in the raging thunderstorm. She was very curious about what he was doing outside so late, especially in such weather. Noah said nothing, simply holding her tightly to make sure she was safe. He began to fire off questions, wanting to know how she felt and what had happened. Lucy only remembered feeling unwell in the dressing room, but it had actually started that morning. Noah was really worried. She had been sleeping a lot lately, and this time she had actually fainted. She had been having headaches ever since she arrived, but they had been getting worse recently. Noah said the healer strongly recommended bed rest. That sounded so boring. Besides, they were supposed to go on a date, which Lucy had missed. So Noah decided to stay with her and asked if there was anything she wanted to do. If this counted as a date and Lucy could ask for anything, she requested that he read to her until she fell asleep. She loved Noah's voice. It was very healing. And as of today, they were officially a couple. So he had better remember this when they celebrate their anniversary. He would never forget this day. To be honest, he would be thinking about it for a long time. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door, and the maid announced that His Majesty had come to visit. Upon hearing this, Lucia asked for a gown to be prepared, promising she would be out soon. The hallway was too dark, but it wasn't hard to make out the crown prince's face. He had heard about what happened to Lady Aurelius today, and was relieved that she was all right now. Since Arthur had come at such a late hour, he apologized and said he didn't want to disturb her. The girl simply hadn't expected him. He said he would send a carriage for her in the morning. Actually, His Majesty had come to give her a contract stamped with the royal seal. Anyone who dared to lay a hand on Lucia or her people would be charged with treason. If Arthur couldn't convince her to change her mind, he hoped this would give her some peace of mind. The council had recently prepared seats for distinguished guests, which Arthur usually attended alone or with his father. The thing was, this time he wanted Lady Aurelius to accompany him. But if he had known she was unwell, he wouldn't have come. Surprisingly, the lady agreed to go. This was their deal, and she would fulfill her part of it. According to the prince, the council wasn't expecting her to show up, and he figured they wouldn't be too happy. Most of them were pro-empire, and the situation had been tense lately. Lucy had read about it. The Draken Empire was founded only 20 years ago. The current emperor overthrew the king of the north and seized the neighboring kingdoms to establish the empire. The council disagreed with dissolving the engagement with the princess because they were convinced the emperor's nephew would inherit the throne. But there were rumors that the former king of the north had survived and was planning a rebellion. Not only that, but His Majesty was certain that the young prince had also survived, and no matter the cost, he would rightfully reclaim the throne that belonged to him. Lady Lucia was busy tonight, spending time with her fiancé, but our guest could not wait. The lady could not receive visitors today, but that didn't stop those who truly wanted to see her. In the hall beneath the clock, a stunning scene unfolded as Lady Lucia finally met the prince. Something seemed to tremble deep inside her. She spotted a familiar figure in the crowd, and in an instant, everything around her ceased to exist, no longer matching. Lucia had eyes for no one else. Everything was clear now. The cycle of life had put everything in its place. This wasn't a plot from Cena's writing at all. This story was completely different from her world. After all this time, Lucy finally saw her. She had missed her so much. A voice calling Cena's name came from behind, and the girls finally found each other. Because Cena had been looking everywhere for her sister, and all of this had happened before.